Hi. Hello. Sorry, I hit the I hit the wrong button. Let me move. Ah! It's all sorts of fucked up. I didn't mean to do that either. Hold on, wait. Wait, hold on, here. Okay, we're actually so back. We are so back. Hello, hi. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong button, and then by moving the OBS scene, it accidentally chose it as well, but it's chill. It's chill, we're back. Dong, thank you for all of the bits. Thank you. Thank you. You ate your ice cream too fast, now you have a headache? That's a classic. That's how it goes. That is how it goes. Also, hello, hello YouTube. Hello people on YouTube. Hi. Hello YouTube bros. Are we ready to read? Are you ready to get read to? Are you ready to hear some stories? Are you ready? Yes. Time for comfy reading. Your ears are ready. If this book sucks, blame the British. Your body is ready. It's gonna be a comfy stream. I'm already super sleepy. My bedroom is so warm. My bedroom is so warm. Can you hear the ambient music noise? Does it sound okay? It's super quiet for me, so I don't know how it's coming across on stream. Is it too loud or what? Is it okay? Is it okay? You should lay down. I could put too loud. I can put my chair in like recliner mode, but I think if I put it in recliner mode, I'll be like even more ready to sleep. I'm already yawning. Okay, are we ready? Let's get into it. Let's get into it. Alright, so this is Books of Blood, volumes 1 to 3 by Clive Barker. Making you yawn? I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I will read the introduction. I will read the introduction to this. Alright. I get more invitations at Halloween than at any other time of the year. Invitations to go to college campuses and talk about the history of horror fiction, or to contribute a list of my 10 favorite fright films for some glossy magazine, or to extemporize a scary story on a late-night chat show at the beginning of my career as a published writer, which began in 1984 with the 3 books you find here collected under one cover. I accepted a large number of such offers, happy to have a platform from which to promote my work. But in recent years, as my books have moved further and further from the unrelenting, bleak, violent tales that earned me some early notice, I've declined most of these offers. I'm uncomfortable being viewed as the horror guy, in quotations, invited out of seclusion at the season of pumpkins and campfire tales to talk about the dark side, while the passions that fuel my current work go undiscussed. I've even avoided the usual Halloween jamborees, the parties and the parades, out of an unease with the whole business. Last year, however, I broke the rule. My lover, David Armstrong. He's gay? Wait, I didn't know he was gay. Okay. Okay, LGBTQA book reading stream, let's get into it. My lover, David Armstrong, persuaded me that a visit to the Halloween parade here in Los Angeles, which has grown into quite an event of late, would be the perfect antidote to the difficult time I was having with my current novel. I should just put down my pen, have a glass of vodka, and join him, he said. I agreed, as long as he didn't insist that I wear a costume. I'd go strictly as a voyeur. Fine, he told me. His costume would be elaborate enough for the 2 of us. Clive Barker is super gay. I was not aware of this. He was an escort. He was a male escort. It was no idle boast. He began his transformation in the middle of the afternoon. It took 6 hours. By the time he was finished, he was unrecognizable. He'd reconfigured his face so it resembled a hawkish, horned gargoyle, spurts of hair sprouting from his brows and chin. He'd painted his body so that he has several shades blacker than the Lord made him. He'd put on several leather accoutrements. It didn't occur to me until later, when I began to make notes for this introduction, that he looked as though he might have stepped out of one of the stories in this collection. An amalgam of sexual excess and demonic elegance, as likely to fuck you as tear out your heart. Painted his body so that he was several shades blacker than the Lord made him is a crazy line. That is insane. Okay. Gay biracial couple. Gay horror biracial couple. Blacker than black, bro. He dark. At 10:30, we went down to the boulevard. It was a bitterly cold night, but once we were amongst the crowd, the sheer number of bodies warmed the air. There were tens of thousands of people thronging the street, a goodly number of them in elaborate costumes. There were Barbie and Ken dolls waddling around in their gaudy boxes. There were drag queens in every kind of outfit, from prom queen to Beverly Hills widow. There were all-American axe murderers with their steroid-pumped bodies gleaming through the bloodied tatters of their t-shirt. There was a small brigade of Confederate soldiers, armed and proud. There were enough silver-skinned and suited aliens to fill a fleet of saucers. And besides these, There were the many thousands who just purchased a mask for the night and were stalking the streets looking like their favorite boogeyman. Frankenstein monsters and their brides, Freddy Kruegers, hook-handed Candymen, even a couple of pinheads. Finally, there was that smaller but noteworthy contingent that was using the event as an excuse for shameless exhibitionism. A group of glamorous transsexuals parading their surgically created attributes. A fellow in a shabby overcoat who was showing every third or fourth person he passed what he had between his legs. A band of gloriously corpulent women who had bound one another into fetishistic costumes so tight it was a wonder they could breathe. There were demons too, but nothing approaching the transformed David, who was constantly called away to play out some scene for a photographer, threatening a blonde Lolita, whipping a tattooed punk in collar and leash, being ravished by a gaggle of boys as valley girls. But here was the curious thing. Watching the way people's eyes fell on my monstrous companion, the mingling of delight and revulsion, I began to remember what had made me a horror writer all those years ago. I had mightily enjoyed eliciting the complicated package of responses, knowing the words I was putting on the page would stop people in their tracks, as my lover's curious beauty was now doing, make them wonder, perhaps, if the line between what they feared and what they took pleasure in was not a good deal finer than they'd once imagined. A short story is like a time capsule. It records, in a fashion that cannot be easily understood until some considerable time has passed, very specific details of how the author's life was being lived when the words were set down. This is not so true of a novel, at least the kind of novels I write, which tend to be large and take a year or more to write. The first draft of a short story may be set down in just a couple of days, pure and intense. A large novel, by contrast, is a kind of compendium. It may even be constructed to embrace contradictions and ambiguities. Go to a fetish event and realize they would make the perfect horror book. Yeah, they're kind of scary. How much did you miss? We're just reading the introduction to the book. Just a little few paragraph intro. But yeah, you did miss some stuff, but it's nothing really important. So now I look at these stories, and almost like a photograph snapped at a party, I find all manner of signs and indications of who I was. Yes, was. I look at these pieces and I don't think the man who wrote them is alive in me anymore. Writing an introduction to the 10th anniversary edition of Weave World last year, I remarked on much of the same thing. The man who'd written that book was no longer around. He died in me, was buried in me. We are all our own graveyards, I believe. We squat amongst the tombs of the people we were. If we're healthy, every day is a celebration, a day of the dead in which we give thanks for the lives that we lived. If we are neurotic, we brood and mourn and wish that the past was still present. Reading these stories over, I feel a little of both. Some of the simple energies that made these words flow through my pen, that made the phrases fictitious and the ideas sing, have gone. I lost their maker a long time ago. He liked horror movies more than I do. He had hopes for Hollywood. He was altogether more gleeful, less self-conscious, less moved by the falling note. I saw myself as a man who runs a freak show, pounding on a drum, summoning up an audience to gawp at my collection of moon calves, and bottled fetuses. Wait, I need to turn my lamp up. It's getting dark in here. That's better. Hi, Okior. Hello. Moon calves? Yeah, but it's one word. Summoning up an audience to gawp at my collection of moon calves, one word, and bottled fetuses. I don't know what a moon calf is. Would you share your collection of bottled fetuses? I would show you like photos of them, yeah? Yeah, why not? That side of my nature has become a good deal more subdued of late. I did my yelling and my drumming. I made my catalog of excesses, and finally, I suppose, grew a little weary of the show. Now, 14 years on, it's odd to revisit the carnival. I realize with hindsight that I was very lucky. I came along with these tales at a time when the publishing industry was still taking risks with fledgling authors and short stories. It would be virtually impossible for an unknown to get a collection like this published today. Mainly because short stories have a much smaller readership than novels. I had in Barbara Boote, B-O-O-T-E, Booty? I don't know. My first editor, someone who was brave enough to take a risk with material that made other editors queasy. And I had the great fortune to make a movie, the first Hellraiser, soon after publication, the success of which drew people to my stories in far larger numbers than I might have otherwise have enjoyed. Looking back, it was a heady time. Is it heady or heady? H-E-A-D-Y. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that one. The legendary creature... Isn't that a legendary creature, a cow that shows up under a full moon and dances in circles? Moon calves are disfigured, mutated cow fetuses. Oh. Wait, yeah, where do I get one of those? I want one. I want one of those. Can I have one of those? I want one. Buy one? Probably off of like eBay or something, right? So many things I'd hoped for, dreamed of, came true in a short period. The books were published and gained some critical favor. A monster I'd created was glowering from cinema screens around the world. People wanted my autographs and my opinions. It seems so remote now. I can still recapture some of the taste of it if I play a certain piece of music or find a passage in one of the stories that I can remember writing. Reading over The Midnight Meat Train, I recall my first trip alone on the New York subway, getting delivered by mistake to the end of the line, which was a darkened, empty station. Reading New Murders in the Rue Morgue, my homage to the greatest horror writer in the world, Edgar Allan Poe. I recall Snowbound Paris, where my late great friend Bill Henry and I were marooned in a silent city, where not a single piece of traffic was moving. Reading Son of a Celluloid, I remember the beaten-up revival cinema in my native Liverpool, in which I saw so many of the films that fueled my imagination as a young man. Franju's Le Yeux Sans Visage, The Extraordinary Oni Baba, The Lush Kwaidan, Kwaidan, I don't know, Liverpool. Pasolini's visionary labors and Fellini's deliriums. Reading Dread, I can even bring to mind the people from my university years who inspired the characters on the page. A dubious form of tribute, I dare say, but they made their mark on me. I don't have any notion whether these stories will survive the passing of time. I doubt any author can know that with any certainty, but they're written, for better or worse, and though I might wish I'd polished the sentence better or excised that, they still please me. That's the most you can hope, I think, that the work you do pleases, both in the doing and the revisiting. One thing is certain, that the public's appetite for stories of the grotesque and the terrifying, for ghostly visitations and demonic possessions, for horrible acts of vengeance and foul monstrosities is as healthy as it ever was. The people behind the masks on Santa Monica Boulevard last October weren't perverts and fiends. They were, for the most part, ordinary folks who were taking the opportunity to express an appetite that our culture demands we repress most of the time. A repression that I perversely applaud, by the way. The appetite is all the more powerful if it's kept under lock and key. But we need to touch the darkness in our souls now and again. It's a way to reconnect with the primal self, the self that probably existed before we could shape words. That know the world contains great light and great darkness, and that one cannot exist without the other. In the journeys my fiction has taken since I wrote these stories, I felt an ever stronger need to explore images of redemption rather than damnation. In Weave World, in Imagika, in Sacraments, and Galil? I don't know how to pronounce this. Galilee, maybe? I don't freaking know. Even in my book for children, The Thief of Always, the images of pain and death are eclipsed by light and sanctity. The figures that represent evil are overthrown. Not so in the stories that follow these observations. Here, the monsters triumph, sometimes transforming those they touch in ways that might be deemed obliquely optimistic, but nevertheless surviving to do harm another day. If, by chance, the evil is overcome, then it more often than not takes its witness and its endures down with it. I don't believe that any one story is truer than any other. The wisdom of these fictions, perhaps all fictions, lie in the effect they have upon individual imaginations. So I don't think it's useful to judge moral import, to try to tease out the lessons these narratives might seem to teach. Though I may occasionally use the terminology of the pulpit, these aren't sermons for either a white or black mass. They're little journeys, little parades, if you will, which wind away from familiar streets into darker and darker territory until, somewhere very far from a place we know, we find ourselves standing in strange company, strange to ourselves. Clive Barker, Los Angeles, February 8th, 1998. Spell it, but we're past that point now. I think it's a name of one of his books. I thought I turned these off. I thought I turned the stream avatars thingies off. I think it's a little distracting. Give me a second. Let me make sure. Let me disable this and disable those. Okay, there we go. Is the audio okay, by the way? Am I too loud? Am I too quiet? It's hard to gauge if everything sounds okay. I don't know. It's good? Okay. Alright, so that was the little intro, so we can start the actual stories now. So this is volume 1, Clive Barker's Books of Blood, and we are going to start with the first short story, which is titled The Book of Blood. The dead have highways. They run unerring lines of ghost trains, of dream carriages across the wastelands behind our lives, bearing an endless traffic of departed souls. Their thrum and throb can be heard in the broken places of the world, through cracks made by acts of cruelty, violence, and depravity. Their freight, the wandering dead, can be glimpsed when the heart is close to bursting, and sights that should be hidden come plainly into view. They have signposts, these highways and bridges and laybys. They have turnpikes and intersections. It is at these intersections where the crowds of dead mingle and cross that this forbidden highway is most likely to spill through into our world. The traffic is heavy at the crossroads, and the voices of the dead are at their most shrill. Here, the barriers that separate one reality from the next are worn thin with the passage of innumerable feet. Such an intersection on the Highway of the Dead was located at number 65 Tollington Place, just a brick-fronted, mock Georgian detached house. Number 65 was unremarkable in every other way. An old, forgettable house, stripped of the cheap grandeur it had once laid claim to. It had stood empty for a decade or more. It was not rising damp that drove tenants from number 65. It was not the rot in the cellars or the subsidence that had opened a crack in the front of the house that ran from doorstep to eaves. It was the noise of passage. In the upper story, the din of that traffic never ceased. It cracked the plaster on the walls and it warped the beams. It rattled the windows. It rattled the mind, too. Number 65 Tollington Place was a haunted house, and no one could possess it for long without the insanity setting in. At some time in its history, a horror had been committed in that house. No one knew when or what, but even to the untrained observer, the oppressive atmosphere of the house, particularly the top story, was unmistakable. There was a memory and a promise of blood in the air of number 65, a scent that lingers in the sinuses and turned the strongest stomach. The building and its environs were shunned by vermin, by birds, even by flies. No woodlice crawled in its kitchen, no starling had nested in its attic. Whatever violence had been done there, it had opened the house up as surely as a knife slits a fish's belly, and through that cut, the wound in the world, the dead peered out and had their way. That was the rumor anyway. Number 67. 65, bro. 65. No brain rot. No brain rot in reading stream. It was the third week of the investigation at 65 Tollington Place. 3 weeks of unprecedented success in the realm of the paranormal. Using a newcomer to the business, a 20-year-old called Simon McNeil as a medium, the Essex University Parapsychology Unit had recorded all but incontrovertible evidence of life after death. In the top room of the house, a claustrophobic corridor of a room, the McNeil boy had apparently summoned the dead, and at his request they had left copious evidence of their visits, writing in 100 different hands on the pale ochre walls. They wrote, it seems, whatever came into their heads, their names, of course, and their birth and death dates, fragments of memories and well wishes to their living descendants, strange, elliptical phrases that hinted at their present torments and mourned their lost joys. Some of the hands were square and ugly, some delicate and feminine. There were obscene drawings and half-finished jokes alongside lines of romantic poetry, a badly drawn rose, a game of noughts and crosses, a shopping list. The famous had come to this wailing wall. Mussolini was there, Lenin and Janis Joplin, and nobodies too, forgotten people, had signed themselves beside the greats. It was a roll call of the dead, and it was growing day by day, as though word of mouth was spreading amongst the lost tribes and seducing them out of silence to sign this barren room with their sacred presence. After a lifetime's work in the field of psychic research, Dr. Florescu was well accustomed to the hard facts of failure. It had been almost comfortable settling back into a certainty that the evidence would never manifest itself. Now, faced with a sudden and spectacular success, she felt both elated and confused. She sat, as she had sat for 3 incredible weeks, in the main room on the middle floor, one flight of stairs down from the writing room, and listened to the clamor of noise from upstairs with a sort of awe, scarcely daring to believe that she was allowed to be present at this miracle. There had been nibbles before, tantalizing hints of voices from another world, but this was the first time that province had insisted on being heard. Upstairs, the noises stopped. Mary looked at her watch. It was 6:17 p.m. 6:17 p.m. For some reason best known to the visitors, the contact never lasted much after 6. She'd wait till 1/2 then go up. What would it have been today? Who would have come to that sordid little room and left their mark? "Shall I set up the cameras?" Reg Fuller, her assistant, asked. "Please," she murmured, distracted by expectation. "Wonder what we'll get today." "We'll leave him 10 minutes." "Sure." Upstairs, McNeil slumped in the corner of the room and watched the October sun through the tiny window. He felt a little shut in, all alone in that damn place, but he still smiled to himself, that wan, beatific smile that melted even the most academic heart. Especially Dr. Florescu's. Oh yes, that woman was infatuated with his smile, his eyes, the lost look he put on for her. It was a fine game. Indeed, at first that was all it had been, a game. Now Simon knew they were playing for bigger stakes. What had begun as a sort of lie detection test had turned into a very serious contest. McNeil versus the truth. The truth was simple. He was a cheat. He penned all the ghost writings on the wall with tiny shreds of lead he secreted under his tongue. He banged and thrashed and shouted without any provocation other than the sheer mischief of it. And the unknown names he wrote? Ha! He laughed to think of it. The names he found in telephone directories. Yes, it was indeed a fine game. She promised him so much. She tempted him with fame, encouraging every lie that he invented. Promises of wealth, of applauded appearances on the television, of an adulation he'd never known before as long as he produced the ghosts. He smiled the smile again. She called him her go-between, an innocent carrier of messages. She'd be up the stairs soon, her eyes on his body, her voice close to tears with her pathetic excitement at another series of scrawled names and nonsense. He liked it when she looked at his nakedness, or all but nakedness. All his sessions were carried out with him only dressed in a pair of briefs, to preclude any hidden aids. A ridiculous precaution. All he needed were the leads under his tongue and enough energy to fling himself around for half an hour, bellowing his head off. He was sweating. The groove of his breastbone was slick with it, his hair plastered to his pale forehead. Today had been hard work. He was looking forward to getting out of the room, sluicing himself down and basking in admiration a while. The go-between put his hand down his briefs and played with himself idly. I mean, well, what else is there to do, I guess? I don't know. Somewhere in the room, a fly, or flies maybe, were trapped. It was late in the season for flies, but he could hear them somewhere close. They buzzed and fretted against the window or around the light bulbs. He heard their tiny fly voices but didn't question them, too engrossed in his thoughts of the game and in the simple delight of stroking himself. How they buzzed, these harmless insect voices, buzzed and sang and complained. How they complained. Mary Florescu drummed the table with her fingers. Her wedding ring was loose today. She felt it moving with the rhythm of her tapping. Sometimes it was tight and sometimes loose, one of those small mysteries that she'd never analyzed properly but simply accepted. In fact, today it was very loose, almost ready to fall off. She thought of Alan's face. Alan's dear face. She thought of it through a hole made of her wedding ring, as if down a tunnel. Was that what his death had been like? Being carried away, and yet further away down a tunnel to the dark? She thrust the ring deeper onto her hand. Through the tips of her index finger and thumb, she seemed almost to taste the sour metal as she touched it. It was a curious sensation, an illusion of some kind. To wash the bitterness away, she thought of the boy. His face came easily, so very easily, splashing into her consciousness with his smile of his unremarkable physique. Still unmanly, like a girl, really. The roundness of him, the sweet clarity of his skin, the innocence. Her fingers were still on the ring, and the sourness she had tasted grew. She looked up. Fuller was organizing the equipment. Around his balding head, a nimbus of pale green light shimmered and wove. She suddenly felt giddy. Fuller saw nothing and heard nothing. His head was bowed to his business, engrossed. Mary stared at him still, seeing the halo on him, feeling new sensations waking in her, coursing through her. The air seemed suddenly alive. The very molecules of oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen jostled against her in an intimate embrace. The nimbus around Fuller's head was spreading, finding fellow radiance in every object in the room. The unnatural sense in her fingertips was spreading too. She could see the color of her breath as she exhaled it, a pinky orange glamour in the bubbling air. She could hear quite clearly the voice of the desk she sat at, the low whine of its solid presence. The world was opening up, throwing her sense into an ecstasy, coaxing them into wild confusion of functions. She was capable, suddenly, of knowing the world as a system, not of politics or religions, but as a system of senses, a system that spread out from the living flesh to the inert wood of her desk, to the stale gold of her wedding ring, and further, beyond wood, beyond gold. The crack opened that led to the highway. In her head, she heard voices that came from no living mouth. She looked up, or rather, some force thrust her head back violently, and she found herself staring up at the ceiling. It was covered with worms. No, that was absurd. It seemed to be alive, though maggoty with life, pulsing, dancing. She could see the boy through the ceiling. He was sitting on the floor with his jutting member in his hand. His head was thrown back like hers. He was as lost in ecstasy as she was. Her new sight saw the throbbing light in and around his body, traced the passion that was seated in his gut, and his head molten with pleasure. It saw another sight, that lie in him, the absence of power where she thought there had been something wonderful. He had no talent to commune with ghosts, nor had he ever had. She saw this plainly. He was a little liar, a boy liar, a sweet, white boy liar without the compassion or the wisdom to understand what he had dared to do. Now it was done. The lies were told, the tricks were played, and the people on the highway, sick beyond death of being misrepresented and mocked, were buzzing at the crack in the wall and demanding satisfaction. The crack she had opened. She had unknowingly fingered and fumbled at, unlocking it by slow degrees. Her desire for the boy had done that. Her endless thoughts of him, her frustration, her heart and her disgust at her heart had pulled the crack wider. Of all the powers that made the system manifest, love and its companion, passion and their companion, loss, were the most potent. Here she was, an embodiment of all three, loving and wanting and sensing acutely the impossibility of the former two, wrapped up in an agony of fear which she had denied herself, believing she loved the boy simply as her go-between. It wasn't true. It wasn't true. She wanted him now, deep inside her. Except that now it was too late. The traffic could be denied no longer. It demanded, yes, it demanded access to the little trickster. She was helpless to prevent it. All she could do was utter a tiny gasp of horror as she saw the highway open out before her and understood that this was no common intersection they stood at. Fuller heard the sound. "Doctor?" He looked up from his tinkering, and his face, washed with a blue light she could see from the corner of her eye, bore an expression of inquiry. "Did you say something?" he asked. She thought, with a full up of her stomach, of how this was bound to end. The other faces of the dead were quite clear in front of her. She could see the profundity of their suffering, and she could sympathize with their ache to be heard. She saw plainly that the highways that crossed the Tollington place were not common thoroughfares. She was not staring at the happy, idling traffic of the ordinary dead. No, that house opened onto a route walked only by the victims and the perpetrators of violence. The men, the women, the children who had died enduring all the pains nerves had to wit to muster, with their minds branded by the circumstances of their deaths. Eloquent beyond words, their eyes spoke their agonies, their ghost bodies still bearing the wounds that had killed them. She could also see, mingling freely with the innocents, their slaughterers and tormentors. These monsters frenzied, mush-minded, blood letters peeked through into the world. Non-such creatures, unspoken, forbidden miracles of our species, chattering and howling their jabberwocky. Now the boy above her sensed them. She saw him turn a little in the silent room, knowing that the voices he heard were not fly voices. The complaints were not insect complaints. He was aware, suddenly, that he had lived in a tiny corner of the world, and that the rest of it, the third, fourth, and fifth worlds, were pressing at his lying back, hungry and irrevocable. The sight of his panic was also a smell and a taste to her. Yes, she tasted him, and she had always longed to, but it was not a kiss that married their senses, it was his growing panic. It filled her up. Her empathy was total. The fearful glance was hers as much his. Their dry throats rasped the same small words. Please, that the child learns. Please, that wins care and gifts. Please, that even the dead, surely even the dead must know and obey. Please. Today, there would be no such mercy given, she knew for certain. The ghosts had despaired on the highway, a grieving age, bearing the wounds they had died with, and the insanities they had slaughtered with. They had endured his levity and insolence, his idiocies, the fabrications that had made a game of their ordeals. They wanted to speak the truth. Fuller was peering at her more closely, his face now swimming in a sea of pulsing orange light. She felt his hands on her skin. They tasted of vinegar. "Are you all right?" he said, his breath like iron. She shook her head. No, she was not all right. Nothing was right. The crack was gaping wider every second. Through it, she could see another sky. The slate heavens that lured? Wait, how do I pronounce this word? Loured? Loured? I don't know. Hi, Arsel. Hi, hello. Hi, I hope. Hi. Jackie Jack Live and Kino Okyo, welcome in. Thank you for the follows. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. The slate heavens that lowered. I'm just gonna pronounce it. Is it lowered? Is it lowered or lowered? I feel like it would be more like lowered. The slate heavens that lowered over the highway. It overwhelmed the mere reality of the house. Please, she said, her eyes rolling up to the fading substance of the ceiling. Wider. Wider. The brittle world she inhabited was stretched to a breaking point. Suddenly it broke, like a dam, and the black waters poured through, inundating the room. Fuller knew something was amiss. It was in the color of his aura, the sudden fear, but he didn't understand what was happening. She felt his spine ripple. She could see his brain whirl. "What's going on?" he said. The pathos of the enquiry made her want to laugh. Upstairs, the water jug in the writing room shattered. Fuller let her go and ran towards the door. It began to rattle and shake even as he approached it, as though all the inhabitants of hell were beating on the other side. The handle turned and turned and turned. The paint blistered. The key glowed red hot. Fuller looked back at the doctor, who was still fixed in that grotesque position, head back, eyes wide. He reached for the handle, but the door opened before he could touch it. The hallway beyond had disappeared altogether. Where the familiar interior had stood, the vista of the highway stretched to the horizon. The sight killed Fuller in a moment. His mind had no strength to take the panorama in. It could not control the overload that ran through his every nerve. His heart stopped. A revolution overturned the order of his system. His bladder failed. His bowels failed. His limbs shook and collapsed. As he sank to the floor, his face began to blister like the door, and his corpse rattle like the handle. He was inert stuff already, as fit for the indignity as wood or steel. Somewhere to the east, his soul joined the wounded highway on its route to the intersection where a moment previously he had died. Mary Florescu knew she was alone. Above her, the marvelous boy, her beautiful, cheating child, was writhing and screeching as the dead set their vengeful hands on his fresh skin. She knew their intention. She could see it in their eyes. There was nothing new about it. Every history had this particular torment in its tradition. He was to be used to record their testaments. He was to be their page, their book, the vessel for their autobiographies, a book of blood, a book made of blood, a book written in blood. She thought of the grimoires that had been made of dead human skin. She'd seen them, touched them. She thought of the tattoos she'd seen, freak show exhibits, some of them, others just shirtless laborers in the street with a message to their mothers pricked across their backs. It was not unknown to write a book of blood. But on such skin, on such gleaming skin, Oh God, that was a crime. She screamed as the torturing needles of broken jug glass skipped against her flesh, plowing it up. She felt his agonies as if they had been hers, and they were not so terrible. Yet he screamed and fought and poured obscenities out of his attackers. They took no notice. They swarmed around him, deaf to any plea or prayer, and worked on him with all the enthusiasm of creatures forced into silence for too long. Mary listened as his voice wearied with its complaints, and she fought against the weight of fear in her limbs. Somehow, she felt, she must get up to the room. It didn't matter what was beyond the door or the stairs. He needed her, and that was enough. She stood up and felt her hair swirl from her head, flailing like the snake hair of the Gorgon Medusa. Reality swam. There was scarcely a floor to be seen beneath her. The boards of the house were ghost wood, and beyond them a seething dark raged and yawned at her. She looked to the door, feeling all the time a lethargy that was so hard to fight off. Clearly, they didn't want her to be there. Maybe, she thought, they even fear me a little. The idea gave her a resolution. Why else were they bothering to intimidate her unless her very presence, having once opened this hole in the world, was now a threat to them? The blistered door was open. Beyond it, the reality of the house had succumbed completely to the howling chaos of the highway. She stepped through, concentrating on the way. Her feet still touched solid floor even though her eyes could no longer see it. The sky above her was Prussian blue, the highway was wide and windy, the dead pressed on every side. She fought through them as through a crowd of living people, while their gawping idiot faces looked at her and hated her in vision. The please was now gone. Now she was nothing. Oh, wait, sorry. The please was gone. Now she said nothing, just gritted her teeth and narrowed her eyes against the highway, kicking her feet forward to find the reality of the stairs that she knew were there. She tripped as she touched them, and a howl went up from the crowd. She couldn't tell if they were laughing at her clumsiness or sounding a warning at how far she had got. First step, second step, third step. Though she was torn out from every side, she was winning against the crowd. Ahead, she could see through the door of the room to where her little liar was sprawled, surrounded by his attackers. His briefs were around his ankles. His briefs were around his ankles. The scene looked like a kind of rape. He screamed no longer, but his eyes were wild with terror and pain. At least he was still alive. The natural resilience of his young mind had half accepted the spectacle that had opened in front of him. Stare. He's getting ravaged by dead people, by dead ghostly creatures. Suddenly, his head jerked around and he looked straight through the door at her. In this extremity, he had dredged up a true talent, a skill that was a fraction of Mary's, but enough to make contact with her. Their eyes met. In a sea of blue darkness, surrounded on every side with a civilization they neither knew nor understood, their living hearts met and married. "I'm sorry," he said silently. It was infinitely pitiful. I'm sorry. He looked away, his gaze wretched from hers. She was certain she must be almost at the top of the stairs, her feet still treading air as far as her eyes could tell. The faces of the travelers above, below, and on every side of her, but she could see, very faintly, the outline of the door and the boards and beams of the room where Simon lay. He was one mass of blood now, from head to foot. She could see the marks, the hieroglyphs of agony on every inch of his torso, his face, his limbs. One moment he seemed to flash into a kind of focus, and she could see him in the empty room, with the sun through the window and the shattered jug at his side. Then her concentration would falter, and instead she'd see the invisible world made visible, and he'd be hanging in the air while they wrote on him from every side plucking out the hair on his head and body to clear the page, writing in his armpits, writing on his eyelids, writing on his genitals, in the creases of his buttocks, on the soles of his feet. Only the wounds were in common between the two sites. Whether she saw him beset with authors or alone in the room, he was bleeding and bleeding. She'd reached the door now, her trembling hand stretched to touch the solid reality of the handle. But even with all the concentration she could muster, it would not come clear. There was barely a ghost image for her to focus on, though it was sufficient. She grasped the handle, turned it, and flung the door of the writing room open. He was there, in front of her. No more than 2 or 3 yards of possessed air separated them. Their eyes met again, and an eloquent look, common to the living and the dead worlds, passed between them. There was compassion in that look, and love. The fictions fell away, the lies were dust. In place of the boy's manipulative smiles was a true sweetness, answered in her face. And the dead, fearful of this look, turned their heads away, their faces tightened as though the skin was being stretched over the bone, their flesh darkening to a bruise, their voices becoming wistful with the anticipation of defeat. She reached to touch him, no longer having to fight against the hordes of the dead. They were falling away from their quarry on every side, like dying flies dropping from a window. She touched him, lightly, on the face. The touch was a benediction. Tears filled his eyes and ran down his sacrificed cheeks, his scarified cheeks, mingling with the blood. This page is, like, printed really poorly. Hold on, give me a second. Clive Barker likes his sexual violence and absurdity. Yeah. I've never seen Hellraiser, but I have heard about it. Nothing wrong with that? No. I feel like a lot of horror stuff kind of does have almost the sexual element to it. It's I don't know. They just kind of fit together, I guess. Sex and violence. Yeah, they just go well. A sweet white boy liar, calling my roommate that tonight. That's a crazy thing to call your roommate. That's a crazy thing to call your roommate, bro. The dead had no voices now, nor even mouths. They were lost along the highway, their malice damned. Plane by plane, the room began to re-establish itself. The floorboards became visible under his sobbing body, every nail, every stained plank. The windows came clearly into view, and outside the twilight street was echoing with the clamor of children. The highway had disappeared from living human sight entirely. Its travelers had turned their faces to the dark and gone away into oblivion, leaving only the signs of their talisman in the concrete world. On the middle landing of number 65, the smoking, blistered body of Reg Fuller was casually trodden by the travelers' feet as they passed over the intersection. At length, Fuller's own soul came by in the throng and glanced down at the flesh he had once occupied, before the crowd pressed him on towards his judgment. Upstairs, in the darkening room, Mary Florescu knelt beside the McNeil boy and stroked his blood-plastered head. She didn't want to leave the house for assistance until she was certain his tormentors would not come back. There was no sound now but the whine of a jet finding its way through the stratosphere to morning. Even the boy's breathing was hushed and regular. No nimbus of light surrounded him. Every sense was in place. Sight, sound, touch. Touch. She touched him now, as she had never previously dared, brushing her fingertips, oh so lightly, over his body, running her fingers across the raised skin like a blind woman reading Braille. There were minute words on every millimeter of his body, written in a multitude of hands. Even through the blood, she could discern the meticulous way that the words had harrowed into him. She could even read, by the dimming light, an occasional phrase. It was proof beyond any doubt, and she wished, oh God, how she wished, that she had not come by it. And yet, after a lifetime of waiting, here it was. The revelation of life beyond flesh, written in flesh itself. The boy would survive, that was clear. Already the blood was drying, and the myriad wounds healing. He was healthy and strong, after all. There would be no fundamental physical damage. His beauty was gone forever, of course. From now on, he would be an object of curiosity at best, and at worst of repugnance and horror. But she would protect him, and he would learn in time how to know and trust her. Their hearts were inextricably tied together. And after a time, when the words on his body were scabs and scars, she would read him. She would trace with infinite love and patience the stories the dead had told on him. The tale on his abdomen written in a fine cursive style, the testimony in exquisite elegant print that covered his face and scalp, the story on his back and on his shin and his hands. She would read them all, report them all, every last syllable that glistened and seeped beneath her adoring fingers, so that the world would know the stories that the dead tell. He was a book of blood, and she, his sole translator. As darkness fell, she left off her vigil and led him, naked, into the balmy night. Here, then, are the stories written on the book of blood. Read, if it pleases you, and learn. They are a map of the dark highway that leads out of life towards unknown destinations. Few will have to take it. Most will go peacefully along lamplit streets, ushered out of living with prayers and caresses. But for a few, a chosen few, the horrors will come skipping to fetch them off to the highway of the damned. So read and learn. It's best to be prepared for the worst, after all, and wise to learn to walk before breath runs out. That was the first story. That was the first story. That was the introduction. The introduction to the Book of Blood. Pretty chill. I would say pretty chill. I gotta drink some water, hold on. The entire design of Xenomorph is entirely sexual. Its evolution is essentially a rape of man. The movements in the film is sensual. The Xenomorph is definitely... I think you can just kind of look at it and know. I think you can just look at it and know. Gloomi Audiobooks 1 this is literally an audiobook. What do you mean? This is an audiobook. I have to hold on. I have to put my fan like solely on myself. I am dying. Can you hear the fan? I can see it picking up on my mic, but I don't know if you can hear it. Angela did not realize anyone found the Xenomorph sexy until a few years ago. I don't think it's... I mean, I don't know. If you really like look at it from a design standpoint, I think it's very obvious that it was meant to be like a sexual creature. I think it's meant and designed to be that way, whether you find it sexy or not. Like, I think the overall design of the Xenomorph is meant to be kind of sexual. HR Giger was a freak, a cool freak though. You're just your dicks all over everything. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of penis. You don't see it, but okay. Donk, you don't see how the Xenomorph is literally designed to be like sexual looking. It's you don't see it either. You don't see the general like distinguishable shape of it. You don't see how it's supposed to be sexual? Hi Octo, hi. H.R. Giger's entire artistic design is on the macabre, sexuality and technology joined into one. The xenomorph head is a penis. Literally, the head of a xenomorph is a big penis. That's literally like the tell of it being designed to like look like sexual. Like, what do you mean? Just because you don't find it attractive, or you don't find, just because you don't think it's like sexual or you want to fuck it, it doesn't mean that the design of it isn't supposed to be sexual. Whose penis? It's like, it's a phallic shape. It's not like going to be identical to anybody's penis. It's meant to be, it's, ayah, you guys don't get it. You guys don't get it. Critical thinking and reading comprehension is, it's dead. It's dead. It's so dead. It's so dead. You do not see it and know you're not baiting. No literacy. Literally no literacy. That's fucked up. It's fucked up. They don't know. You're not gonna call him slow? You can say retarded, bro. It's okay. Me not seeing a xenomorph as a big penis doesn't mean anything about my literacy, you gooner. It's not even a gooner thing. Like, this is a thing. They are designed to be like, they're designed with like sexuality in mind. Like, but it's not a gooner thing. This is a known artistic choice. Yeah. It's not a gooner thing, it's an artistic motif. Yes, exactly. Oh my god. You guys are crazy. There's a reason a facehugger looks like a pussy. The xenomorph being a violent sexual force is intentional. Yes. Of course. And the thing that comes out of its mouth and everything, you know, and the facehugger going down your throat and everything like that, like the, you know, it's, you guys don't get it. This has to be like a rage bait. It has to be rage bait. Go watch, not even watch, go read an article on it. Watch a 2-hour YouTube documentary on it or whatever, but go read up on it. Go read up. Porn addicts, I swear. It's not a porn thing. It's not a gooner thing. Things can be sexual and not be fucking gooner, okay? What do you mean? It's so obvious these guys gotta be lying. I think so. I think so. Reading is for nerds. Octo, this is a reading stream. This is a reading stream. Must be rage bait. I think so. I think it must be rage bait. The worst part though is it's not even one person. It's multiple of them. It's multiple of these little freaks. This book is a good example of something sexual but not gooner coded, at least so far. Yeah, pretty much. High IQ Gloomi response. I can be pretty smart sometimes, I would like to think. I think majority of the time I am pretty stupid, but I think sometimes I can be quite smart. NGL. NGL. Gloomi went to art school. She knows art. I do know art. I do know how to read art. This is true. Ooh, an ad break started. I'm going to take a little break to get some more water, and I'm also going to take some of the throat the throat, the Chinese throat syrup to help with my throat, because it's starting to hurt and we're only 2 hours into stream, bro. So, yeah, let's take a quick little break. Let's stretch a little bit and everything too. Yeah, BRB. Hello, hi. I'm back. I'm back. Also, I do know how to torrent stuff. I just don't like to torrent big things because it's scary. Hi. Hello, welcome back. Did you guys take a break as well? Did you take a break? Did you take a break? Nah? Oh, I see. Prove it? Torrent right now? No, I'm not gonna torrent right now. I'm not gonna torrent right now. You goon to alien? Nice. Putting away your drum kit? You don't leave it set up like all the time? Wouldn't it be easier to leave it just set up all of the time? You watch my BRB and wait for you to get back. Eh? No, the breaks are for everybody to take a break. You should get up. You should get up and stretch and get some water, go pee or something, get a little snack. Or take up too much space in your room. Oh, that's a shame. Get rid of your bed frame. Put your mattress on the floor, and then you'll have room to have your drum kit set up permanently. You don't have a bed frame. I should have known. I should have already known that. That adds up. You got the diaper tech. Work finally done. Yippee! Are you home now, or are you on your way home, Dr. Frederick? No sleep, only beats. What the fuck does that mean? Anyways. Ready for the next story? Go back to reading. Are you ready for the next story? Well, I think this one's definitely a little bit longer. Yeah, this one's a bit longer. Average male living space. r/male living spaces. Echo's room is definitely on there. Is there one with xenomorphs? I doubt it. Maybe something esque, but no xenomorphs. Your manager called you and asked if you can work tomorrow? No, Octo, take some time to yourself. One day off is not enough. Take tomorrow off too. Do not go into work. Do not go into work. Okay, next story. Octo, you fuck. Alright, next one. This one is called The Midnight Meat Train. The Midnight Meat Train. Leon Kaufman was no longer new to the city. The Palace of Delights, he'd always called it, in the days of his innocence. But that was when he'd lived in Atlanta, and New York was still a kind of promised land, where anything and everything was possible. Now Kaufman had lived 3.5 months in his dream city, and the Palace of Delights seemed less than delightful. Was it really only a season since he stepped out of the Port Authority bus station and looked up 42nd Street towards the Broadway intersection? So short a time to lose so many treasured illusions. He was embarrassed now even to think of his naivety. It made him wince to remember how he had stood and announced aloud, "New York, I love you." Love? Never. It had been at best an infatuation. And now, after only 3 months living with his objects of adoration, spending his days and nights in her presence, she had lost her aura of perfection. New York was just a city. He had seen her wake in the mornings like a slut and pick murdered men from between her teeth and suicides from the tangles of her hair. He had seen her late at night, her dirty back streets shamelessly courting depravity. He had watched her in the hot afternoon, sluggish and ugly, indifferent to the atrocities that were being committed every hour in her throttled passages. It was no palace of delights. It bred death, not pleasure. Everyone he met had brushed with violence. It was a fact of life. It was almost chic to have known someone who had died a violent death. It was proof of living in that city. But Kaufman loved New York from afar for almost 20 years. He planned his love affair for most of his adult life. It was not easy, therefore, to shake the passion off, as though he had never felt it. There were still times very early before the cop sirens began, or at twilight, when Manhattan was still a miracle. For those moments, and for the sake of his dreams, he still gave her the benefit of the doubt, even when her behavior was less than ladylike. She didn't make such forgiveness easy. In the few months that Kaufman had lived in New York, her streets had been awash with spilt blood. In fact, it was not so much the streets themselves, but the tunnels beneath those streets. Subway slaughter was the catchphrase of the month. Only the previous week, another 3 killings had been reported. The bodies had been discovered in one of the subway cars on the Avenue of the Americas, hacked open and partially disemboweled, as though an efficient abattoir operative had been interpreted in his work. The killings were so thoroughly professional that the police were interviewing every man on their records who had some past connection with the butchery trade. The meat packing plants and the waterfront were being watched, the slaughterhouses scoured for clues. A swift arrest was promised, though none was made. This recent trio of corpses was not the first to be discovered in such a state. The very day that Kaufman had arrived, a story had broken in the Times that was still the talk of every morbid secretary in the office. The story went that a German visitor, lost in the subway system late at night, had come across a body in a train. The victim was a well-built, attractive 30-year-old woman from Brooklyn. She had been completely stripped, every shred of clothing, every article of jewelry, even the studs in her ears. More bizarre than the stripping was the neat and systematic way in which the clothes had been folded and placed in individual plastic bags on the seat beside the corpse. This was no irrational slasher at work. This was a highly organized mind, a lunatic with a strong sense of tidiness. Hi Cole, hello, hi. Further and yet more bizarre than the careful stripping of the corpse was the outrage that had been perpetrated upon it. The reports claimed, though the police department failed to confirm this, that the body had been meticulously shaved. Every hair had been removed from the head, from the groin, from beneath the arms, all cut and scorched back to the flesh. Even the eyebrows and the eyelashes had been plucked out. Finally, this all too naked slab had been hung by the feet from one of the holding handles set in the roof of the car, and a black plastic bucket lined with a black plastic bag had been placed beneath the corpse to catch the steady fall of blood from its wounds. In that state, stripped, shaved, suspended, and practically bled white, the body of Loretta Dyer had been found. It was disgusting, it was meticulous, and it was deeply confusing. There had been no rape nor any sign of torture. The woman had been swiftly and efficiently dispatched as though she was a piece of meat, and the butcher was still loose. The city fathers, in their wisdom, declared a complete close down on the press reports of the slaughter. It was said that the man who had found the body was in protective custody in New Jersey, out of sight of inquiring journalists. But the cover-up had failed. Some greedy cop had leaked the salient details to a reporter from the Times. Everyone in New York now knew the horrible story of the slaughters. It was a topic of conversation in every deli and bar, and, of course, on the subway. But Loretta Dyer was only the first. Now 3 more bodies had been found in identical circumstances, though the work had clearly been interrupted on this occasion. Not all the bodies had been shaved, and the jugulars had not been severed to bleed them. There was another, more significant difference in the discovery. It was not a tourist who had stumbled on the site, it was a reporter from the New York Times. Kaufman surveyed the report that sprawled across the front page of the newspaper. He had no prurient interest in this story, unlike his elbow mate along the counter of the deli. All he felt was a mild disgust that made him push his plate of overcooked eggs aside. It was simply further proof of his city's decadence. He could take no pleasure in her sickness. Wait, I gotta turn my fan off. I'm getting cold now. Let me just put it on a light breeze. Okay, this should be okay. Nevertheless, being human, he could not entirely ignore the gory details on the page in front of him. The article was unsensationally written, but the simple clarity of the style made the subject seem more appalling. He couldn't help wondering, too, about the man behind the atrocities. Was there one psychotic loose, or several, each inspired to copy the original murderer? Perhaps this was only the beginning of the horror. Maybe more murderers would follow, until at last the murderer, in his exhilaration or exhaustion, would step beyond caution and be taken. Until then, the city, Kaufman's adored city, would live in a state somewhere between hysteria and ecstasy. At his elbow, a bearded man knocked over Kaufman's coffee. "Shit," he said. Kaufman stood on his stool to avoid the dribble of coffee running off the counter. "Shit," the man said again. "No harm done," said Kaufman. He looked at the man with a slightly disdainful expression on his face. The clumsy bastard was attempting to soak up the coffee with a napkin, which was turning to mush as he did so. Kaufman found himself wondering if this oaf, with his florid cheeks and his uncultivated beard, was capable of murder. Was there any sign on that overfed face, any clue in the shape of his head or in the turn of his small eyes that gave his true nature away? The man spoke. "Want another?" Kaufman shook his head. "Coffee, regular, dark," the oaf said to the girl behind the counter. She looked up from cleaning the grill of cold fat. "Huh? Coffee? You deaf?" The man grinned at Kaufman. "Deaf," he said. Kaufman noticed he had 3 teeth missing from his lower jaw. "Looks bad, huh?" he said. What did he mean? The coffee? The absence of his teeth? 3 people like that, carved up. Kaufman nodded. "Makes you think," he said. "Sure. I mean, it's a cover-up, isn't it? They know who did it." This conversation's ridiculous, thought Kaufman. He took off his spectacles and pocketed them. The bearded face was no longer in focus. That was some improvement, at least. "Bastards," he said. "Fucking bastards, all of them. I'll lay you anything it's a cover-up." "Of what?" "They got the evidence. They're just keeping us in the fucking dark. There's something out there that's not human." Kaufman understood. It was a conspiracy theory the oaf was trotting out. He'd heard them so often. A panacea? Is that panacea? P-A-N-A-C-E-A? Panacea. Panacea. Yes? Yes? Okay. Panacea. What does that mean? What is a panacea? I don't know this word. Medicine? A universal cure, a cure-all. Ah, okay. I get it in this context. Okay. It was a conspiracy theory the oaf was trotting out. He'd heard them so often. A panacea. See, they do all this cloning stuff and it gets out of hand. They could be growing fucking monsters for all we know. There's something down there they won't tell us about. Cover up, like I say. Lay you anything. Kaufman found the man's certainty attractive. Monsters on the prowl, 6 heads, a dozen eyes, why not? He knew why not. Because that excused his city, that left her off the hook, and Kaufman believed in her heart that the monsters to be found in the tunnels were perfectly human. The bearded man threw his money on the counter and got up, sliding his fat bottom off the stained plastic stool. "Probably a fucking cop," he said as his parting shot. "Tried to make a fucking hero, made a fucking monster instead. He grinned grotesquely. "Lay you anything," he continued, and lumbered out without another word. Kaufman slowly exhaled through his nose, feeling the tension in his body abate. He hated that sort of confrontation. It made him feel tongue-tied and ineffectual. Come to think of it, he hated that kind of man, the opinionated brute that New York bred so well. It was coming up to 6 when Mahogany woke. The morning rain had turned into a light drizzle by twilight. The air was about as clear-smelling as it ever got in Manhattan. He stretched on his bed, threw off his dirty blanket, and got up for work. In the bathroom, the rain was dripping on the box of the air conditioner, filling the apartment with a rhythmical slapping sound. Mahogany turned on the television to cover the noise, disinterested in anything it had to offer. He went to the window. The street 6 floors below was thick with traffic and people. After a hard day's work, New York was on its way home. To play, to make love. People were streaming out of their offices and into their automobiles. Some would be testy after a day's sweaty labor in a badly aired office. Others, benign as sheep, would be wandering home down the avenues, ushered along by a ceaseless current of bodies. Still, others would even now be cramming onto the subway, blind to the graffiti on every wall, deaf to the babble of their own voices and to the cold thunder of the tunnels. It pleased Mahogany to think of that. He was, after all, not one of the common herd. He could stand at his window and look down on the 1,000 heads below him and know he was a chosen man. He had deadlines to meet, of course, like the people in the street, but his work was not their senseless labor. It was more like a sacred duty. He needed to live and sleep and shit like them too, but it was not financial necessity that drove him, but the demands of history. He was in a great tradition that stretched further back than America. He was a night stalker, like Jack the Ripper, like Giles de Reyes, a living embodiment of death, a wrath with a human face. He was a haunter of sleep and an awakener of terrors. The people below him could not know his face, nor would care to look twice at him, but his stare caught them and weighed them up, selecting only the ripest from the passing parade, choosing only the healthy and the young to fall under his sanctified knife. Sometimes Mahogany longed to announce his identity to the world, but he had responsibilities and they bore on him heavily. He couldn't expect fame. His was a secret life, and it was merely pride that longed for recognition. After all, he thought, does the beef salute the butcher as it throbs to its knees? All in all, he was content. To be part of the great tradition was enough, would always have to remain enough. Recently, however, there had been discoveries. They weren't his fault, of course. Nobody could possibly blame him, but it was a bad time. Life was not as easy as it had been 10 years ago. He was that much older, of course, and that made the job more exhausting, and more the obligations weighed on his shoulders. He was a chosen man, and that was a difficult privilege to live with. He wondered, now and then, if it wasn't time to think about training a younger man for his duties. There would need to be consultations with the fathers, but sooner or later a replacement would have to be found, and it would be, he felt, a criminal waste of his experience not to take on an apprentice. There were so many felicities he could pass on, the tricks of his extraordinary trade, the best way to stalk, to cut, to strip, to bleed, the best meat for the purpose, the simplest ways to dispose of the remains, so much detail, so much accumulated experience. Mahogany wandered into the bathroom and turned on the shower. As he stepped in, he looked down at his body. The small paunch, the graying hairs on his sagging chest, the scars and pimples that littered his pale skin. He was getting old. Still, tonight, like every other night, he had a job to do. Kaufman hurried back into the lobby with his sandwich, turning down his collar and brushing rain off his hair. The clock above the elevator read 7:16 and he would work through until 10, no later. The elevator took him to the 12th floor and to the Papa's offices. He traipsed unhappily through the maze of empty desks and hooded machines to his little territory, which was still illuminated. The women who cleaned the offices were chatting down the corridor. Otherwise, the place was lifeless. You're hearing things? What are you hearing? What do you mean? What are you hearing? He took off his coat, shook the rain off it as best he could, and hung it up. Then he sat down in front of the piles of orders he had been tussling with for the best part of 3 days and began work. It would only take one more night's labor, he felt sure, to break the back of the job, and he found it easier to concentrate without the incessant clatter of typists and typewriters on every side. He unwrapped his ham on whole wheat with extra mayonnaise and settled in for the evening. It was 9 now. Mahogany was dressed for the night shift. He had his usual sober suit on with his brown tie neatly knotted. His silver cufflinks, a gift from his first wife, placed in the sleeves of his immaculately pressed shirt, his thinning hair gleaming with oil, his nails snipped and polished, his face flushed with cologne. His bag was packed, the towels, the instruments, his chainmail apron. He checked his appearance in the mirror. He could, he thought, still be taken for a man of 45, 50 at the outside. As he surveyed the face, he reminded himself of his duty. Above all, he must be careful. There would be eyes on him every step of the way, watching his performance tonight and judging it. He must walk out like an innocent, arousing no suspicion. If they only knew, he thought, the people who walked, ran, and skipped past him on the streets, who collided with him without apology, who met his gaze with contempt, who smiled at his bulk, looking uneasy in his ill-fitting suit. If only they knew what he did, what he was, and what he carried. Caution, he said to himself, and turned off the light. The apartment was dark. He went to the door and opened it, used to walking in blackness, happy in it. The rain clouds had cleared entirely. Mahogany made his way down Amsterdam towards the subway at 145th Street. Tonight, he'd take the Avenue of the Americas again, his favorite line and often the most productive. Down the subway steps, token in hand. Through the automatic gates, the smell of the tunnels was in his nostrils now. Not the smell of the deep tunnel, of course. They had a scent all of their own. But there was reassurance even in the stale, electric air of this shallow line. The regurgitated breath of a million travelers circulated in this warren, mingling with the breath of creatures far older, things with voices soft like clay, whose appetites were abominable. How he loved it. The scent, the dark, the thunder. He stood on the platform and scanned his fellow travelers critically. There were 1 or 2 bodies he contemplated following, but there was so much dross amongst them, so few worth the chase. The physically wasted, the obese, the ill, the weary, bodies destroyed by excess and by indifference. As a professional, it sickened him, though he understood the weakness that spoiled the best of men. He lingered in the station for over an hour, wandering between platforms while the trains came and went, and the people with them. There was so little of quality around it. There was so little of quality around it was dispiriting. It seemed he had to wait longer and longer every day to find flesh worthy of use. It was now almost 10:30, and he had not seen a single creature who was really ideal for slaughter. No matter, he told himself. There was time yet. Very soon the theater crowd would be emerging. They were always good for a sturdy body or two. The well-fed intelligentsia, clutching their ticket stubs and opening on the diversions of art. Oh yes, there'd be something there. If not, and there were nights when it seemed he could never find something suitable, he'd have to ride downtown and corner a couple of lovers out late or find an athlete or two fresh from one of the gyms. They were always sure to offer good material, except that with such healthy specimens there was always risk of resistance. He remembered catching 2 black bucks a year ago or more, with maybe 40 years between them, father and son perhaps. They'd resisted with knives, and he'd been hospitalized for 6 weeks. It had been a close-fought encounter, and one that had set him doubting his skills. Worse, it had made him wonder what his masters would have done with him had he suffered a fatal injury. Would he have been delivered to his family in New Jersey and given a decent Christian burial, or would his carcass have been thrown into the dark for their own use? The headline of the New York Post discarded on the seat across from him caught Mahogany's eye. Police all out to catch killer. He couldn't resist a smile. Thoughts of failure, weakness, and death evaporated. After all, he was that man, the killer, and tonight, the thought of capture was laughable. After all, wasn't his career sanctioned by the highest possible authorities? No policeman could hold him. No court passed judgment on him. The very forces of law and order that made such a show of his pursuit served his masters no less than he. He almost wished some two-bit cop would catch him, take him in triumph before the judges just to see the looks on their faces when the word came up from the dark that Mahogany was a protected man, above every law of the statute books. It was now well after 10:30. The trickle of theater-goers had begun, but there was nothing likely so far. He'd want to let the rush pass anyways. Just follow one or two choice pieces to the end of the line. He bided his time, like any wise hunter. Hold on, I need to drink some water. Oh, you have pizza? Oh, pizza sounds so good. Pizza sounds so yummy. Okay. Kaufman was not finished by 11, an hour after he'd promised himself release. But exasperation and ennui were making the job more difficult, and the sheets of figures were beginning to blur in front of him. At 11:10, he threw down his pen and admitted defeat. He rubbed his hot eyes with the cushions of his palms till his head filled with colors. "Fuck it," he said. He never swore in company, but once in a while, to say fuck it to himself was a great consolation. He made his way out of the office, damp coat over his arms, and headed for the elevator. His limbs felt drugged, and his eyes would scarcely stay open. It was colder outside than he had anticipated, and the air brought him out of his lethargy a little. He walked towards the subway at 34th Street. Catch an express to Far Rockaway, home in an hour. Neither Kaufman nor Mahogany knew it, but at 96th and Broadway, the police had arrested what they took to be the subway killer, having trapped him in one of the uptown trains. A small man of European extraction, wielding a hammer and a saw, had cornered a young woman in the second car and threatened to cut her in half in the name of Jehovah. Whether he was capable of fulfilling this threat was doubtful. As it was, he didn't get the chance. While the rest of the passengers, including 2 Marines, looked on, the intended victim landed a kick to the man's testicles. He dropped the hammer, she picked it up and broke his lower jaw and right cheekbone with it before the Marines stepped in. When the train halted at 96, the police were waiting to arrest the subway butcher. They rushed the car in a horde, yelling like banshees and scared as shit. The butcher was lying in one corner of the car with his face in pieces. They carted him away, triumphant. The woman, after questioning, went home with the Marines. It was to be a useful diversion, though Mahogany couldn't know it at the time. It took the police the best part of the night to determine the identity of their prisoner, chiefly because he couldn't do more than drool through his shattered jaw. It wasn't until 3:30 in the morning that one Captain Davis, coming on duty, recognized the man as a retired flower salesman from the Bronx called Hank Vasserly. Hank, it seemed, was regularly arrested for threatening behavior and indecent exposure, all in the name of Jehovah. Appearances deceived, he was about as dangerous as the Easter Bunny. This was not the subway slaughterer. But by the time the cops had worked that out, Mahogany had been about his business a long while. You ordered food? What did you order? What did you get to eat? It was 11:15 when Kaufman got on the express through to Mott Avenue. He shared the car with two other travelers. One was a middle-aged black woman in a purple coat, the other a pale, acne-ridden adolescent who was staring at the "Kiss My White Ass" graffiti on the ceiling with spaced-out eyes. Kaufman was in the first car. He had a journey of 35 minutes duration ahead of him. He let his eyes slide closed, reassured by the rhythmical rocking of the train. It was a tedious journey and he was tired. He didn't see the lights flicker off in the second car. He didn't see Mahogany's face either, staring through the door between the cars, looking through for some more meat. At 14th Street, the black woman got out. Nobody got in. Kaufman opened his eyes briefly, taking in the empty platform at 14th, then shut them again. The doors hissed closed. He was drifting in that warm, somewhere between alertness and sleep, and there was a fluttering of nascent dreams in his head. It was a good feeling. The train was off again, rattling down into the tunnels. Maybe at the back of his dozing mind, Kaufman half-registered that the doors between the second and first cars had been slid open. Maybe he smelt the sudden gush of tunnel air and registered that the noise of wheels was momentarily louder, but he chose to ignore it. Maybe he even heard the scuffle as Mahogany subdued the young with the spaced-out stare, but the sound was too distant and the promise of sleep was too tempting. He drowsed on. For some reason, his dreams were of his mother's kitchen. She was chopping turnips and smiling sweetly as she chopped. He was only small in his dream, and was looking up at her radiant face while she worked. Chop, chop, chop. His eyes jerked open. His mother vanished. The car was empty, and the youth was gone. How long had he been dozing? He hadn't remembered the train stopping at West 4th Street. He got up, his head full of slumber, and almost fell over as the train rocked violently. It seemed to have gathered quite a substantial head of speed. Maybe the driver was keen to be home, wrapped up in bed with his wife. They were going at a fair lick, in fact. It was bloody terrifying. There was a blind drawn down over the window between the cars, which hadn't been down before as he remembered. A little concern crept into Kaufman's sober head. Suppose he'd been sleeping a long while, and the guard had overlooked him in the car. Perhaps they'd passed Far Rockaway and the train was now speeding on its way to wherever they took the trains for the night. Fuck it, he said aloud. Should he go forward and ask the driver? It was such a bloody idiot question to ask. Where am I? At this time of night, was he likely to get more than a stream of abuse by way of reply? The train began to slow. A station. Yes, a station. The train emerged from the tunnel and into the dirty light of the station at West 4th Street. He'd missed no stops. So where had the boy gone? He'd either ignored the warning on the car wall forbidding transfer between the cars while in transit, or else he'd gone into the driver's cabin up front. Probably between the driver's legs even now, Kaufman thought, his lip curling. It wasn't unheard of. This was the Palace of Delights, after all, and everyone had their right to a little love in the dark. Kaufman shrugged to himself. What did he care where the boy had gone? The doors closed. Nobody had boarded the train. It shunted off from the station, the lights flickering as it used a surge of power to pick up some speed again. Kaufman felt the desire for sleep come over him afresh, but the sudden fear of being lost had pumped adrenaline into his system and his limbs were tingling with nervous energy. His senses were sharpened too. Even over the clatter and the rumble of the wheels on the tracks, he heard the sound of tearing cloth coming from the next car. Was someone tearing their shirt off? He stood up, grasping one of the straps for balance. The window between the cars was completely curtained off, but he stared at it, frowning, as though he might suddenly discover X-ray vision. The car rocked and rolled. It was really traveling again. Another ripping sound. Was it rape? With no more than a mild voyeuristic urge, he moved down the seesawing car toward the intersecting door, hoping there might be a chink in the curtain. His eyes were still fixed on the window, and he failed to notice the splatters of blood he was treading in until his heel slipped. He looked down. His stomach almost saw the blood before his brain, and the ham on whole wheat was halfway up his gullet, catching in the back of his throat. Blood. He took several large gulps of stale air and looked away, back at the window. His head was saying blood. Nothing would make the word go away. There was no more than a yard or two between him and the door now. He had to look. There was blood on his shoe, and a thin trail to the next car, but still he had to look. He had to. He took 2 more steps to the door and scanned the curtain, looking for a flaw in the blind. A pulled thread in the weave would be sufficient. There was a tiny hole. He glued his eye to it. His mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing beyond the door. It rejected the spectacle as preposterous, as a dreamed sight. His reason said it couldn't be real, but his flesh knew it was. His body became rigid with terror. His eyes, unblinking, could not close off the appalling scene through the curtain. He stayed at the door while the train rattled on, while his blood drained from his extremities and his brain reeled from lack of oxygen. Brief spots of light flashed in front of his vision, blotting out the atrocity. Then he fainted. He was unconscious when the train reached J Street. He was deaf to the driver's announcement that all travelers beyond that station would have to change trains. He had heard that he would have he had heard this was had he heard this, he would have questioned the sense of it. No trains disgorged all their passengers at J Street. The line ran to Mott Avenue via the Aqueduct racetrack past JFK Airport. He would have asked what kind of train this could be, except that he already knew. The truth was hanging in the next car. It was smiling contentedly to itself from behind a bloody chainmail apron. This was the midnight meat train. Wait, hold on. I need to readjust my sitting position. The Squirt Dimension. That's a crazy username. Welcome in. Thank you for the follow. Thank you. I appreciate it. There's no accounting for time in a dead fate. It would have been seconds or hours that passed before Kaufman's eyes flickered open again, and his mind focused on his newfound situation. He lay under one of the seats now, sprawled along the vibrating wall of the car, hidden from view. Fate was with him so far, he thought. Somehow, the rocking of the car must have jockeyed his unconscious body out of sight. He thought of the horror in car 2 and swallowed back vomit. He was alone. Wherever the guard was, murdered perhaps, there was no way he could call for help. And the driver? Was he dead at his controls? Was the train even now hurtling through an unknown tunnel? A tunnel without a single station to identify it, towards its destruction. And if there was no crash to be killed in, there was always the butcher, still hacking away a door's thickness from where Kaufman lay. Whichever way he turned, the name on the door was death. The noise was deafening, especially lying on the floor. Kaufman's teeth were shaking in their sockets and his face felt numb with vibrations. Even his skull was aching. Gradually, he felt strength seeping back to his exhausted limbs. He cautiously stretched his fingers and clenched his fists to set the blood flowing there again. And the feeling returned. So did the nausea. He kept seeing the grisly brutality of the next car. He'd seen photographs of murder victims before, of course, but these were no common murders. He was in the same train as the subway butcher, the monster who strung his victims up by the feet from the straps, hairless and naked. How long would it be before the killer stepped through that door and claimed him? He was sure that if the slaughterer didn't finish him, expectation would. He heard movement beyond the door. Instinct took over. Kaufman thrust himself further under the seat and tucked himself up into a tiny ball with his sick, white face to the wall. Then he covered his head with his hands and closed his eyes as tightly as any child in terror of the boogeyman. The door was slid open. Click. Whoosh. A rush of air from the rails. It smelt stranger than any Kaufman had smelt before, and colder. This was somehow primal air in his nostrils, hostile and unfathomable air. It made him shudder. The door closed. Click. The butcher was close. Kaufman knew it. He could be standing no more than a matter of inches from where he lay. Was he even now looking down at Kaufman's back, even now bending knife in hand to scoop Kaufman out of his hiding place like a snail hooked from its shell? Nothing happened. He felt no breath on his neck. His spine was not slit open. There was simply a clatter of feet close to Kaufman's head, then the same sound receding. Kaufman's breath, held in his lungs till they hurt, was expelled in a rasp between his teeth. Mahogany was almost disappointed that the sleeping man had aligned at West 4th Street. He was hoping for one more job to do that night, to keep him occupied while they descended, but no, the man had gone. The potential victim hadn't looked that healthy anyways, he thought to himself. He was an anemic Jewish accountant, probably. The meat wouldn't have been of any quality, okay? Mahogany walked the length of the car to the driver's cabin. He'd spend the rest of the journey there. My Christ, thought Kaufman, he's going to kill the driver. Definitely not kosher. No, the meat would be kosher. The meat would have been kosher. He heard the cabin door open, then the voice of the butcher, low and hoarse. Hi. Hi. They knew each other. All done? All done. Kaufman was shocked by the banality of the exchange. All done? What did that mean, all done? He missed the next few words as the train hit a particularly noisy section of track. Kaufman could resist looking no longer. Warily, he uncurled himself and glanced over his shoulder down the length of the car. All he could see was the butcher's legs and the bottom of the open cabin door. Damn, he wanted to see the monster's face again. There was laughter now. Kaufman calculated the risks of his situation, the mathematics of panic. If he remained where he was, sooner or later the butcher would glance down at him, and he'd be mincemeat. On the other hand, if he were to move from his hiding place, he would risk being seen and pursued. Which was worse? Stasis and meeting his death trapped in a hole, or making a break for it and confronting his maker in the middle of the car. Kaufman surprised himself with his mettle. He'd move. Infinitesimally? What is this word? Infinitesimally, slowly he crawled out from under the seat, watching the butcher's back every minute as he did so. Once out, he began to crawl towards the door. Each step he took was a torment, but the butcher seemed far too engrossed in his conversation to turn around. Kaufman had reached the door. He began to stand up, trying all the while to prepare himself for the sight he would meet in car 2. The handle was grasped, and he slid the door open. It's like infinite. Infinitesimally. I don't know. Yeah, like that. Infinitesimally. That's such a mouthful. It's such a mouthful. Infinitesimally. Yeah. It's a big word. It's a big word. Don't gloomy me. It's a mouthful. Okay. The door, and he slid the door open. The noise of the rails increased, and a wave of dank air, stinking of nothing on earth, came up at him. Surely the butcher must hear or smell. Surely he must turn. But no, Kaufman skinned his way through the slit he had opened and so through into the bloody chamber beyond. Relief made him careless. He failed to latch the door properly behind him and it began to slide open with the buffeting of the train. Mahogany put his head out of the cabin and stared down the car towards the door. "What the fuck's that?" said the driver. "Didn't close the door properly, that's all." Kaufman heard the butcher walking towards the door. He crouched, a ball of consternation against the intersecting wall, suddenly aware of how full his bowels were. The door was pulled close from the other side and the footsteps receded again. Safe, for another breath at least. Kaufman opened his eyes, steeling himself for the slaughter pen in front of him. There was no avoiding it. It filled every one of his senses. The smell of opened entrails, the sight of the bodies, the feel of fluid on the floor underneath his fingers, the sound of the straps creaking beneath the weight of the corpses, even the air tasting salty with blood. He was with death, absolutely in the cubbyhole, hurtling through the dark. But there was no nausea now. There was no feeling left but a casual revulsion. He even found himself peering at the bodies with some curiosity. The carcass closest to him was the remains of the pimply youth he'd seen in Car 1. The body hung upside down, swinging back and forth to the rhythm of the train in unison with its three fellows. An obscene dance macabre. Its arms dangled loosely from the shoulder joints into which gashes an inch or two deep had been made, so the bodies would hang more neatly. Every part of the dead kid's anatomy was swaying hypnotically, the tongue hanging from the open mouth, the head lolling on its slit neck. Even the youth's penis flapped from side to side on his plucked groin. The head wound and the open jugular still pulsed blood into a black bucket. There was an elegance about the whole sight, a sign of a job well done. Beyond the body were the strung-up corpses of two young white women and a darker-skinned male. Kaufman turned his head on one side to look at their faces. They were quite blank. One of the girls was a beauty. He decided the male had been Puerto Rican. All were shorn of their head and body hair. In fact, the air was still pungent with the smell of the shearing. Kaufman slid up the wall out of the crouching position, and as he did so, one of the woman's bodies turned around, presenting a dorsal view. He was not prepared for this last horror. The meat of her back had been entirely cleft open from neck to buttocks, and the muscle had been peeled back to expose the glistening vertebrae. It was the final triumph of the butcher's craft. Here they hung, these shaved, bled, slit slabs of humanity opened up like fish and ripe for devouring. Kaufman almost smiled at the perfection of its horror. He felt an offer of insanity tickling the base of his skull, tempting him into oblivion, promising a blank indifference to the world. He began to shake, uncontrollably. He felt his vocal cords trying to form a scream. It was intolerable, and yet to scream was to become in a short while like the creatures in front of him. "Fuck it," he said more loudly than he'd intended. Then, pushing himself off from the wall, he began to walk down the car between the swaying corpses, observing the neat piles of clothes and belongings that sat on the seats beside their owners. Under his feet, the floor was sticky with drying bile. Even with his eyes closed to cracks, he could see the blood in the buckets too clearly. It was thick and heady, flecks of grit turning in it. He was past the youth now, and he could see the door into Car 3. Ahead, all he had to do was run his gauntlet of atrocities. He urged himself on, trying to ignore the horrors and concentrate on the door that would lead him back to sanity. He was past the first woman. A few more yards, he said to himself, 10 steps at most, less if he walked with confidence. Then, the lights went out. "Jesus Christ," he said. The train lurched, and Kaufman lost his balance. In the utter blackness, he reached out for support, and his flailing arms encompassed the body beside him. Before he could prevent himself, he felt his hands sinking into the lukewarm flesh, and his fingers grasping the open edge of muscle on the dead woman's back, his fingertips touching the bone of her spine. His cheek was laid against the bald flesh of her thigh. He screamed, and even as he screamed, the lights flickered back on. As they flickered back on and his scream died, he heard the noise of the butcher's feet approaching down the length of the car 1 towards the intervening door. He let go of the body he was embracing. His face was smeared with blood from her leg. He could feel it on his cheek, like war paint. The scream had cleared Kaufman's head and suddenly felt released into a kind of strength. There would be no pursuit down the train. He knew that. There would be no cowardice, not now. This was going to be a primitive confrontation. 2 human beings, face to face, and there would be no trick, none, that he couldn't contemplate using to bring his enemy down. This was a matter of survival, pure and simple. The door handle rattled. Kaufman looked around for a weapon, his eyes steady and calculating. His gaze fell on the pile of clothes beside the Puerto Rican's body. There was a knife there, lying amongst the rhinestone rings and the imitation gold chains. A long-bladed, immaculately clean weapon, probably the man's pride and joy. Reaching past the well-muscled body, Kaufman plucked the knife from the heap. It felt good in his hands. In fact, it felt positively thrilling. The door was opening, and the face of the slaughterer came into view. Kaufman looked down the abattoir at Mahogany. He was not terribly fearsome, just another balding, overweight man of 50. His face was heavy and his eyes deep-set. His mouth was rather small and delicately lipped. In fact, he had a woman's mouth. Mahogany could not understand where this intruder had appeared from, but he was aware that it was another oversight, another sign of increasing incompetence. He must dispatch this ragged creature immediately. After all, they could not be more than a mile or 2 from the end of the line. He must cut the little man down and have him hanging by his heels before they reached their destination. He moved into car 2. "You were asleep," he said, recognizing Kaufman. "I saw you." Kaufman said nothing. "You should have left the train. What were you trying to do? Hide from me?" Kaufman still kept his silence. Mahogany grasped the hand of the cleaver hanging from his well-used leather belt. It was dirty with blood, as was his chainmail apron, his hammer, and his saw. "As it is," he said, "I'll have to do away with you." Kaufman raised the knife. It looked a little small beside the butcher's paraphernalia. "Fuck it," he said. Mahogany grinned at the little man's pretensions to defense. You shouldn't have seen this. It's not for the likes of you," he said, taking another step towards Kaufman. "It's secret." "Oh, so he's the divinely inspired type, is he?" thought Kaufman. That explains something. "Fuck it," he said again. The butcher frowned. He didn't like the little man's indifference to his work, to his reputation. "We all have to die sometime," he said. "You should be well pleased. You're not going to be burnt up like most of them. I can use you to feed the fathers." Kaufman's only response was a grin. He was past being terrorized by this gross, shambling hulk. The butcher unhooked the cleaver from his belt and brandished it. "A dirty little Jew like you," he said, "should be thankful to be useful at all. Meat's the best you can aspire to." Without warning, the butcher swung. The cleaver divided the air at some speed, but Kaufman stepped back. The cleaver sliced his coat arm and buried itself in the Puerto Rican's shank. The impact half severed the leg, and its weight of the body opened the gash even further. The exposed meat of the thigh was like prime steak, succulent and appetizing. The butcher started to drag the cleaver out of the wound, and in that moment Kaufman sprang. The knife sped towards Mahogany's eyes, but an error of judgment buried it instead in his neck. It transfixed the column and appeared in a little gout of gore on the other side, straight through, in one stroke, straight through. Mahogany felt the blade in his neck as a choking sensation, almost as though he had caught a chicken bone in his throat. He made a ridiculous, half-hearted coughing sound. Blood issued from his lips, painting them like lipstick on his woman's mouth. The cleaver clattered to the floor. Kaufman pulled out the knife. The 2 wounds spouted like arcs of blood. Mahogany collapsed to his knees, staring at the knife that had killed him. The little man was watching him quite passively. He was saying something, but Mahogany's ears were deaf to the remarks, as though he was underwater. Mahogany suddenly went blind. He knew He knew with a nostalgia for his senses that he could not see or hear again. This was death. It was on him, for certain. His hands still felt the weave of his trousers, however, and the hot splashes on his skin. His life seemed to totter on its tiptoes while his fingers grasped at one last sense. Then his body collapsed, and his hands and his life and his sacred duty folded up under a weight of grey flesh. The butcher was dead. Kaufman dragged gulps of stale air into his lungs and grabbed one of the straps to steady his reeling body. Tears blotted out the shambles he stood in. A time passed. He didn't know how long. He was lost in a dream of victory. Then the train began to slow. He felt and heard the brakes being applied. The hanging bodies lurched forward as the careering train slowed, its wheels squealing on rails that were sweating slime. Curiosity took over Kaufman. Would the train shunt into the butcher's underground slaughterhouse, decorated with the meats he had gathered through his career? And the laughing driver, so indifferent to the massacre, what would he do once the train had stopped? Whatever happened now was academic. He could face anything at all, watch and see. The Tannoy cackled, the voice of the driver. "We're here, man. Better take your place, eh?" Take your place? What did that mean? The train had slowed to a snail's pace. Outside the windows, everything was dark as ever. The lights flickered, then went out. This time, they didn't come back on. Kaufman was left in total darkness. "We'll be out in half an hour," the Tannoy announced, so like any station report. The train had come to a stop. The sound of its wheels on the tracks, the rush of its passage, which Kaufman had grown so used to, were suddenly absent. All he could hear was the hum of the Tannoy. He could see nothing at all. Then, a hiss. The doors were opening. A smell entered the car. A smell so caustic that Kaufman clapped his hands over his face to shut it out. He stood in silence, hand to mouth, for what seemed like a lifetime. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Then there was a flicker of light outside the window. It threw the door frame into silhouette, and it grew stronger by degrees. Soon there was sufficient light in the car for Kaufman to see the crumpled body of the butcher at his feet, and the swallow sides of meat hanging on every side of him. There was a whisper, too, from the dark outside the train. A gathering of tiny noises like voices of beetles in the tunnel shuffling towards the train were human beings. Kaufman could see their outlines now. Some of them carried torches, which burned with the dead brown light. The noise was perhaps their feet on the damp earth, or perhaps their tongues clicking, or both. Kaufman wasn't as naive as he'd been an hour before. Could there be any doubt as to the intention these things had, coming out of the blackness towards the train? The butcher had slaughtered the men and women as meat for these cannibals. They were coming, like diners at the dinner gong, to eat in the restaurant car. Kaufman bent down and picked up the cleaver the butcher had dropped. The noise of the creature's approach was louder every moment. He backed down the car away from the open doors, only to find that the doors behind him were also open. And there was the whisper of approach. There too. He shrank back against one of the seats and was about to take refuge under them when a hand, thin and frail to the point of transparency, appeared around the door. He could not look away. Not that terror froze him as it had at the window. He simply wanted to watch. The creature stepped into the car. The torches behind it threw its face into shadow, but its outline could be clearly seen. There was nothing very remarkable about it. It had 2 arms and 2 legs as he did. Its head was not abnormally shaped. The body was small, and the effort of climbing into the train made its breath coarse. It seemed more geriatric than psychotic. Generations of fictional man-eaters had not prepared him for its distressing vulnerability. Behind it, similar creatures were appearing out of the darkness, shuffling into the train. In fact, they were coming in at every door. Kaufman was trapped. He weighed the cleaver in his hands, getting the balance of it, ready for the battle with these antique monsters. A torch had been brought into the car, and it illuminated the faces of the leaders. They were completely bald. The tired flesh of their faces was pulled tight over their skulls so that it shone with tension. There were stains of decay and disease on their skin, and in places the muscle had withered to a black pus, through which the bones of cheek and temple were showing. Some of them were naked as babies, their pulsy, syphilitic bodies scarcely sexed. What had been breasts were leathery bags hanging off the torso, and genitalia shrunken away. Worse sights than the naked amongst them were those who wore a veil of clothes. It soon dawned on Kaufman that the rotting fabric slung around their shoulders or knotted around their midriffs was made of human skins. Not one, but a dozen or more, heaped haphazardly on top of each other like pathetic trophies. The leaders of this grotesque meal line had reached the bodies now, and the gracile hands were laid upon the shanks of meat, and were running up and down the shaved flesh in a manner that suggested sensual pleasure. Tongues were dancing out of mouths, flecks of spittle landing on the meat. The eyes of the monsters were flickering back and forth with hunger and excitement. Eventually, one of them saw Kaufman. Its eyes stopped flickering for a moment and fixed on him. A look of inquiry came over the face, making a parody of puzzlement. "You," it said. The voice was as wasted as the lips it came from. Kaufman raised the cleaver a little, calculating his chances. There were perhaps 30 of them in the car and many more outside, but they looked so weak and they had no weapons but their skin and bones. The monster spoke again, its voice quite well modulated, but when it found itself the monster spoke again, its voice quite well modulated, when it found itself the piping of a once cultured, once charming man. "You came after the others, yes?" It glanced down at the body of Mahogany. It had clearly taken in the situation very quickly. "Old anyway," it said, its watery eyes back on Kaufman, studying him with care. "Fuck you," said Kaufman. The creature attempted a wry smile, but it had almost forgotten the technique, and the result was a grimace which exposed a mouthful of teeth and made the that had been systematically filed into points. Wait, I need to drink some water. Hold on. Ooh. My throat is getting scratchy. Ooh, okay. Sounds like an accurate group of cannibals. Kind of. I don't know. Maybe? "You must now do this for us," it said through the bestial grin. "We cannot survive without food." The hand patted the rump of human flesh. Kaufman had no reply to the idea. He just stared in disgust as the fingernails slid between the cleft in the buttocks, feeling the swell of tender muscle. "It disgusts us no less than you," said the creature. "But we're bound to eat this meat, or we die. God knows I have no appetite for it." The thing was drooling nevertheless. Kaufman found his voice. It was small, more with a confusion of feelings than with fear. "What are you?" He remembered the bearded man in the deli. "Are you ancients of some kind?" We are the city fathers," the thing said, "and mothers, and daughters, and sons. The builders, the lawn makers. We made this city." "New York," said Kaufman. "The Palace of Delights?" "Before you were born. Before anyone living was born." As it spoke, the creature's fingernails were running up under the skin of the split body and were peeling the thin elastic layer off the luscious brawn. Behind Kaufman, the other creatures had begun to unhook the bodies from the straps, their hands laid in that same delighting manner on the smooth breasts and flanks of flesh. These too had begun skinning the meat. "You will bring us more," the father said. "More meat for us." The other one was weak. Kaufman stared in disbelief. "Me?" he said. "Feed you? What do you think I am?" "You must do it for us, and for those older than us, for those born before the city was thought of, when America was a timberland and desert." The fragile hand gestured out of the train. Kaufman's gaze followed the pointing finger into the gloom. There was something else outside the train which he'd failed to see before, much bigger than anything human. The pack of creatures parted to let Kaufman through so that he could inspect more closely whatever it was that stood outside, but his feet would not move. "Go on," said the father. Kaufman thought of the city he'd loved. Were these really its ancients, its philosophers, its creators? He had to believe it. Perhaps there were people on the surface, bureaucrats, politicians, authorities of every kind who knew this horrible secret and whose lives were dedicated to preserving these abominations, feeding them as savages feed lambs to their gods. There was a horrible familiarity about this ritual. It rang a bell, not in Kaufman's conscious mind, but in his deeper, older self. His feet, no longer obeying his mind, but with his instinct to worship, moved. He walked through the corridor of bodies and stepped out of the train. The light of the torches scarcely began to illuminate the limitless darkness outside. The air seemed solid. It was so thick with the smell of ancient earth, but Kaufman smelt nothing. His head bowed. It was all he could do to prevent himself from fainting again. It was there, the precursor of man, the original American, whose homeland this was before Passamaquoddy or Cheyenne. Its eyes, if it had eyes, were on him. His body shook. His teeth chattered. He could hear the noise of its anatomy, ticking, cracking, crackling, sobbing. It shifted a little in the dark. The sound of its movement was awesome, like a mountain sitting up. Kaufman's face was raised to it, and without thinking about what he was doing or why, he fell to his knees in the shit in front of the Father of Fathers. Every day of his life had been leading to this day, every moment quickening to the incalculable moment of horror, of holy terror. Had there been sufficient light in that pit to see the whole, perhaps his tepid heart would have burst. As it was, he felt it flutter in his chest, and he saw what he saw. It was a giant, without head or limb, without a feature that was analogous to human, without an organ that made sense or senses. If it was like anything, it was like a shoal of fish, 1,000 snouts all moving in unison, budding, blossoming, and withering rhythmically. It was iridescent, like mother of pearl, but it was sometimes deeper than any color Kaufman knew or could put a name to. That was all Kaufman could see, and it was more than he wanted to see. There was much more in the darkness, flickering and flapping. But he could no longer. He turned away, and as he did so, a football was pitched out of the train and rolled to a halt in front of the father. At least, he thought it was a football, until he peered more attentively at it and recognized it as a human head, the head of the butcher. The skin of the face had been peeled off in strips. It glistened with blood as it lay in front of its lord. Kaufman looked away and walked back to the train. Every part of his body seemed to be weeping but his eyes. They were too hot with the sight behind him. They boiled his tears away. Inside, the creatures had already set about their supper. One, he saw, was plucking the blue sweet morsel of a woman's eye out of the socket. Another had a hand in its mouth. At Kaufman's feet lay the butcher's headless corpse, still bleeding profusely from where its neck had been bitten through. The little father who had spoken earlier stood in front of Kaufman. "Serve us," it asked gently, as you might ask a cow to follow you. Kaufman was staring at the cleaver, the butcher's symbol of office. The creatures were leaving the car now, dragging the half-eaten bodies after them, and the torches were taken out of the car. As the torches were taken out of the car, darkness was returning. But before the lights had completely disappeared, the father reached out and took hold of Kaufman's face, thrusting him round to look at himself in the filthy glass of the car window. It was a thin reflection, but Kaufman could see quite well enough how changed he was, whiter than any living man should be, covered in grime and blood. The father's hand still gripped Kaufman's face, and its forefinger hooked into his mouth and down his gullet, the nail scoring the back of his throat. Kaufman gagged on the intruder, but had no will left to repel the attack. "Serve," said the creature, in silence. Too late, Kaufman realized the intention of the fingers. Suddenly, his tongue was seized tight and twisted on the root. Kaufman, in shock, dropped the cleaver. He tried to scream, but no sound came. Blood was in his throat. He heard his flesh tearing, and agonies convulsed him. Then the hand was out of his mouth, and the scarlet, spittle-covered fingers were in front of his face, with his tongue held between thumb and forefinger. Kaufman was speechless. "Serve," said the father, and stuffed the tongue into his own mouth, chewing on it with evident satisfaction. Kaufman fell to his knees, spewing up his sandwich. The father was already shuffling away into the dark. The rest of the ancients had disappeared into their warren for another night. The tonneau crackled. "Home," said the driver. The doors hissed closed, and the sound of power surged through the train. The lights flickered on, and then off again, then on. The train began to move. Kaufman lay on the floor, tears pouring down his face, tears of discomfiture and of resignation. He would bleed to death, he decided. Where he lay, it didn't matter if he died. It was a foul world anyway. The driver woke him. He opened his eyes. The face that was looking down at him was black and not unfriendly. It grinned. Kaufman tried to say something, but his mouth was sealed up with dried blood. He jerked his head around like a drivel trying to spit out a word. Nothing came but grunts. He wasn't dead. He hadn't bled to death. The driver pulled him to his knees, talking to him as though he was a 3-year-old. "You got a job to do, my man. They're very pleased with you." The driver had licked his fingers and was rubbing Kaufman's swollen lips, trying to part them. Lots to learn before tomorrow night. Lots to learn. Lots to learn. He let Kaufman out of the train. They were in no station he had ever seen before. It was white-tiled and absolutely pristine, a station keeper's nirvana. No graffiti disfigured the walls, there were no token booths, but then there were no gates and no passengers either. This was a line that provided only one service, the meat train. A morning shift of cleaners were already busy hosing the blood off the seats and the floor of the train. Somebody was stripping the butcher's body in preparation for dispatch to New Jersey. All around Kaufman, people were at work. A rain of dawn light was pouring through a grating in the roof of the station. Motes of dust hung in the beams, turning over and over. Kaufman watched them, entranced. He hadn't seen such a beautiful thing since he was a child. Lovely dust, over and over, over and over. The driver had managed to separate Kaufman's lips. His mouth was too wounded for him to move it, but at least he could breathe easily, and the pain was already beginning to subside. The driver smiled at him, then turned to the rest of the workers in the station. "I'd like to introduce Mahogany's replacement, our new butcher," he announced. The workers looked at Kaufman. There was a certain deference in their faces, which he found appealing. Kaufman looked up at the sunlight, now falling all around him. He jerked his head, signifying that he wanted to go up into the open air. The driver nodded and led him up a steep flight of stairs and through an alleyway and so out onto the sidewalk. It was a beautiful day. The bright sky over New York was streaked with filaments of pale pink cloud, and the air smelt of morning. The streets and avenues were particularly empty. At a distance, an occasional cab crossed an intersection, its engine a whisper. A runner sweated past on the other side of the street. Very soon, these same deserted sidewalks would be thronged with people. The city would go about its business in ignorance, never knowing what it was built upon or what it owed its life to. Without hesitation, Kaufman fell to his knees and kissed the dirty concrete with his bloody lips, silently swearing his eternal loyalty to its continuance. The Palace of Delights received the adoration without comment. that's the end. The end. The end. And everybody on the meat train clapped. Hi, Warlock Peen. Hello, hi. Ugh. Good story. Good story. Good story. Dino! Hi, thank you for resubscribing. Thank you. Thank you for the tier 3. Thank you for 12 months. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the 1 year. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Forgot how much I didn't like the twist ending. The ending twist. I don't like it that much. I didn't like the ending that much. I didn't like the supernatural twist. I was just excited for serial killer story, but it wasn't serial killer story. Tried to make it Lovecraftian, but he flubbed it. It's just aliens. It's about the journey, not the ending. I mean, I feel like the ending of a story is very important. I did enjoy it, but it felt a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Typical, I guess, you know? Oh, there's like overlords that we all are slaves to type deal. I don't know. Should it made a curse or something like Ouroboros? That maybe would have been better than like physical entities, yeah. Not bad though. Not bad. I'm wondering if like any of the other stories are... I don't know if maybe any of these stories are just straight like serial killer horror. I would like that, but I'm not sure. You missed a bit with the butcher. Did he die on screen? No, Kaufman kills him. Kaufman kills him. Yeah. After he calls him, maybe I shouldn't repeat that line. Yeah, he stabs him, through the neck. Through the throat. With a knife. A grubby little, shit. Am I gonna have to remove the VOD? Wait, I just thought about that. I might have to remove the VOD so this doesn't get, that part doesn't get clipped. Oh, and maybe on YouTube too. It's from reading the book. I don't know. Can I leave it up or is it not allowed? It's from the book, so you'll be fine. But like, I feel like what if it gets taken out of context? Like, what if someone clips it out of context? And then, I don't know, leave it up? Okay, well, if I can't stream next week, it's your fault. Did I disable rewinding? I did not. I know Jew isn't a slur, but the thing he said I feel like could maybe be like a hateful towards a certain group of people. No, I did not disable rewinding. I don't know how to. I don't know how to. Or how to enable it. Twitch must be doing stuff. Perhaps, maybe. Let me see how long the next story is. How long did it take to read that one? Oh, let me do this. The next one is like a little bit shorter, but I would say it's probably around the same length. I think they're kind of all about the same length. Let me see. Oh, it is getting ridiculously windy outside. Yeah, they're kind of, from the looks of it, they're kind of all about the same, kind of all about the same-ish length. I think the first one was maybe just a bit of a shorter one. Yeah, they're pretty much all the same. I think the next one is just slightly shorter, just slightly shorter. Do you want to do one more? One more? She already wants to stop reading? Nah, my throat hurts. I think it's pretty obvious that my throat is sore. But I think we can do maybe one more. Hydrate. Ugh, I've been drinking water. Yeah, maybe I'll take a break. Maybe I'll take a little break. I would like to stretch. I like to stretch my back and go pee. I would like to stretch and go pee. Yeah, let's do that. Let's take a little break, okay? I'll be RB. Hi, hi, hello, hi, 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 hi. Welcome back. Hi, welcome back. Hi, 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 hello. What's sour cream? It's cream that's sour. Why are you guys talking about sour cream? I would not have sour cream on rice though. That's not I don't, like on plain rice. I would not have sour cream on plain rice. Runny eggs over white rice. I don't like. Okay. Opinion on eggs. I don't like my eggs runny. I don't like my fried eggs runny, but I like my scrambled eggs soft. I like my scrambled eggs soft, but I don't like my fried eggs runny. Hi Itchy on YouTube. Hi. Can't eat eggs unless they're cooked scrambled. It took me actually more time to get used to scrambled eggs than it took me to get used to fried eggs. It took me a really long time to like scrambled eggs, but I don't know, eggs are kind of a weird one for me. I have to like be in the mood for them. Runny eggs are fine, but you like the yolk soft and gooey. When you learned how to properly cook eggs, you couldn't get used to it. What is properly cooking an egg? How? Eggs are very gross. No goon. No goon? What does no goon mean? Oh, no good. Oh, okay. No good. I was like, wait, are you supposed to be gooning to your eggs? You hated scrambled eggs as a kid and later just learned your mom sucked at making scrambled eggs. My mom, I feel like, yeah, I didn't like scrambled eggs growing up, and I definitely feel like it's because my mom just like didn't care about how she made them. So I feel like they were very overcooked. Making runny is the proper way to cook it according to Chef Ramsay. I do like my eggs, my scrambled eggs, like not necessarily like runny, but more like on the softer side, a little bit wet, but not like runny, you know? Literally, I just cook the scrambled eggs just in some butter. Just keep them just a little bit wet, but nothing crazy. Your mom would make yours in the microwave? No! Ew! That sounds like the worst way to eat an egg. Ugh. No, thank you. No, thank you. We gotta kill the microwave. We gotta kill the microwave. Put some butter in them. I only cook my scrambled eggs. I just do a little bit of butter. I just do butter in the pan, and then just the eggs, and then some salt and some pepper, and that's it. You like eggs, but you need something with it. You can't raw dog it. It's gotta be mixed with like bread or butter, bacon or sausage or waffles. Yeah, I have to have something with my eggs too. Like usually I'll do like toast with eggs, like with either some butter on the toast or like maybe a little bit of mayo or tomatoes or avocado or something. It can't really do it on its own. You hardly ever use salt when you cook. I feel like eggs would taste really shit without salt. You heat them up slowly while constantly stirring in the pan. No, I wait for my pan to be like hot as fuck. Take it off the heat, throw my butter in there, put it back on the heat, throw my eggs in, and then my eggs are cooked in like less than 30 seconds. Less than 30 seconds. Make her eat all the microwave scrambled eggs. Ugh. Microwave eggs is how you usually ate eggs. That and a slice of American with cinnamon apple sauce on the side. Oh, I haven't had applesauce in so long. Applesauce is good. That's what you do, but you don't put it back on the heat. Yeah, I normally turn my heat down like a little bit. Like I preheat my pan on medium, and then when it's hot enough, I take it off the heat. I throw the butter on. I turn it down to maybe like a 3, like I don't know, low, medium, in between low, medium, and then put them back on and throw the eggs on. And then usually the eggs are cooked within like 30-ish seconds, 30 to 40 seconds. It's alright with no salt. The butter does a good job. I definitely think you'd eat a little bit of salt on eggs. A cup of dry rice is enough. Yeah, one cup of dry rice. Yeah, that's probably a little. I don't think I could eat a whole cup of rice to myself. Always salt and pepper. Literally always salt and pepper. Yeah, I think, I don't know. Eggs don't have like a lot of flavor. You give them flavor by using butter and salt. So, yeah. I think you need salt on eggs. Cook eggs too fast? No, I don't. I don't know if I have a picture of like, there was one point where I remember I made like the best scrambled eggs I'd ever made in my whole life. And I used these like really nice eggs too, so they looked super nice. They were good eggs. Making it with butter and pink Himalayan salt. I don't like plain white rice with butter. I don't like it. I don't freaking like it. I think butter in rice is really, like, in white rice is gross. You need to try mixing a splash of milk in with the scrambled eggs. Enough with the milk. Enough. You have enough dairy from the butter. You don't need more. Rice goes with everything, plain or not. No, butter, plain white rice and butter is a very like white person thing to do. I would just rather eat rice plain. You use milk instead of butter. How do you make the eggs? You need something in the pan for the eggs to not stick, which is the butter. What do you mean? What do you cook your eggs in then to have them not stick? White rice and butter sounds foul. A lot of like white people, they put butter in like the rice when they cook it. You make it creamy? You have a proper non-stick pan? I don't have a non-stick pan. I only have stainless steel pan. There's fat in the milk? But I don't need the fat. I don't need the fat. Cream if you want for extra fluff. No, if you scramble, if you whisk your eggs good enough, you already incorporate enough air to make them fluffy. You don't need cream for fluff. You always add some oil or butter to the pot when you're boiling rice. Oh. Yeah, there's something wrong with this guy. There is something wrong with this guy. What the fuck do you mean you have a no, I don't have a non-stick pan. I only have stainless steel pans. I only have stainless steel pans. You rubbed your eyes and you got something spicy in them? What the hell? Were you cooking? I thought you had onion soup. I thought you had your onion soup. Why are you cooking spicy stuff? Gloomi only accepts kitchenware from the 1950s? No! Stainless steel is the best thing to cook with. It's quite literally like the highest quality for cooking. Spicy onion. Wrong. I don't trust the non-sticks. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I know you can get like you can get higher quality ones, but I don't like the stainless steel. I mean, not the stainless steel, the non-stick. Oh, you're making lunch? Oh. The Teflon? Yeah, that's the scary part. If you suck at stainless steel, that's a skill issue. This is true. This is very true. You have to know how to use the stainless steel properly. This is very true. Ceramic nonstick. Yeah, that's the one. You can get ceramic ones. Yeah. You only have your cast iron. Oh my god, I forgot to tell you guys about this. My cast iron, so, I had some onions in my cupboard, and I had them sitting in my cast iron, and this was like probably weeks ago, maybe over like a month ago, but I completely forgot all about it. I had onions sitting in the cast iron, and I don't think I had these onions for very long, but I don't know. Sometimes you never know what you're getting, how long the food has been in the grocery store for or whatever. So I went to go grab an onion. I don't know what I was cooking. It was probably making dinner of some sort. I went to go and grab an onion, and one of them was like, I grabbed it and it was like kind of squishy. I was like, oh, this onion's gone bad. Okay, I'm gonna throw it out. I went to grab the other onion because it looked okay. It looked okay. I went to grab it and it had fused itself onto my cast iron pan. And I had to like scrape it off, and once I peeled it off, it was like super slimy. It was like dry on the outside. It was like super like dried and like crispy on the outside, but the underneath, once I had like scraped it off of the cast iron pan, it was like super like squishy and like leaky and like slimy and wet. But the biggest issue the bigger issue is that there was mold, and there was mold all since it had fused onto the cast iron, and where the onion had been fused into. Now my cast iron just had like a layer of like mold over it. So I scraped off all of the mold, and then I washed my cast iron, and now it just has like a big patch on it that's like completely discolored. It's like orange, and it looks super fucked up. So I'm kind of scared to ever attempt to use it now. Did you leave it there since last year? I didn't have the onions for very long. I just think the ones I got from the grocery store were just like already on their way out, you know? Cast iron that inflicts poison damage when you cook with it. It's over, you gotta get a new one. Ooh. Sounds like a bit of rust. It might be rust. I don't know how you de-rust to cast iron. Super easy fix, you just need to re-season it. Do you think so? How old were those onions? Literally, listen, I just said they weren't that old. They were not that old. I think they were just like not that great when I bought them from the grocery store. How old is not that old? I don't know. I probably had them for like 2 weeks or something. That's like a normal time for onions. Probably less than 2 weeks, but I think they were just like already bad at the grocery store. Seasoned cast iron, seasoned with the taste of moldy onion. I don't know. I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. I never use the freaking cast iron anyways, so that's why it's all fucked up, because I don't use it. Time to spend $50 on another one. Just scrub and reseason if you're scared. The thing is, I never use the cast iron because it's so much effort to take care of, and I'm fucking lazy as fuck. So I think it'll just continue to be my onion holder. It'll just live on as my as my onion holder from here on out. It's fine, it's fine. It's fine. Okay, do we want to do one more story? Do we want to do one more story? Infest all the onions? No, there's no mold anymore. I cleaned it. There's no mold. It's clean. It's just a little bit rusty now or something. I don't know. Yes, one more. Do karaoke. What's with the karaoke? What's with the constant karaoke? Why? Good night, Tux. Good night. Good night. Thank you for hanging out. Sleep well. Oyasumi nashai. Oyasumi. You liked last karaoke? What was last karaoke? I don't even remember. Oh, Ram Ranch. You liked Ram Ranch? Almost like we like it when you're singing. Everyone has to be miserable and embarrassed like me. Bruh. Okay. Next story is called The Yattering and Jack. Oh, what the fuck just happened? I accidentally hit something on my keyboard with the book. What? Okay. Alright. The Yattering and Jack. Why the powers, long may they hold court, long may they shit light on the heads of the damned, had sent it out from hell to stalk Jack Polo, the Yattering couldn't discover. Whenever he passed a tentative inquiry along the system to his master, just asking the simple question, "What am I doing here?" it was answered with a swift rebuke for its curiosity. None of its business, came the reply. Its business was to do, or die trying. And after 6 months of pursuing Polo, the Yattering was beginning to see extinction as an easy option. This endless game of hide-and-seek was to nobody's benefit, and the Yattering's immense frustration. It feared ulcers, it feared psychosomatic leprosy, conditioned lower demons like itself were susceptible to. Worst of all, it feared losing its temper completely and killing the man outright in an uncontrollable fit of pike. What was Jack Polo anyways? A gherkin importer by the balls of Leviticus. He was simply a gherkin importer. His life was worn out, his family was dull, his politics were simple-minded, and his theology non-existent. The man was in no account of one of nature's blankest little numbers. Why bother with the likes of him? This wasn't a Faust, a pact maker, a soul seller. This one wouldn't look twice at the chance of divine inspiration. He'd sniff, shrug, and get on with his gherkin importing. Yet the Yattering was bound to that house, long night and longer day, until he had the man a lunatic or as good as. It was going to be a lengthy job, if not interminable. Yes, there were times when even psychomantic leprosy would be bearable if it meant being invalidated off this impossible mission. Invalided. Okay. For his part, Jack J. Polo continued to be the most unknowing of men. He had always been that way. Indeed, his story was littered with the victims of his naivety. When his late lamented wife had cheated on him, he'd been in the house on at least 2 of the occasions watching the television. He was the last one to find out. And the clues they'd left them. A blind, deaf and dumb man would have become suspicious. Not Jack. He pottered about his dull business and never noticed the tang of the adulterer's cologne, nor the abnormal regularities with which his wife changed the bed linen. He was no less disinterested in events when his younger daughter, Amanda, confessed his lesbianism to him. His response was a sigh and a puzzled look. "Well, at least you don't get pregnant, darling," he replied, and sauntered off into the garden, blithe as ever. What chance did a fury have with a man like that? To a creature trained to put its meddling fingers into the wounds of the human psyche, Polo offered a surface so glacial, so utterly without distinguishing marks as to deny malice any hold whatsoever. Events seemed to make no dent in his perfect indifference. His life's disasters seemed not to scar his mind at all. When eventually he was confronted with the truth about his wife's infidelity, he found them screwing in the bath. He couldn't bring himself to be hurt or humiliated. These things happen, he said to himself, backing out of the bathroom to let them finish what they'd started. Chez Sarah, Sarah. Chez Sarah, Sarah. The man muttered the damn phrase with monotonous regularity. He seemed to live by the philosophy of fatalism, letting attacks on his manhood, ambition, and dignity slide off his ego like rainwater from his bald head. The Yattering had heard Polo's wife confess all to her husband. It was hanging upside down from the light fitting, invisible as ever, and the scene had made it wince. There was this distraught sinner begging to be accused, bawled at, struck even, and instead of giving her the satisfaction of his hatred, Polo just shrugged at her and let her say her piece without a word of interruption, until she had no more to unbosom. She'd left at length more out of frustration and sorrow than guilt. The Yattering had heard her tell the bathroom mirror how insulted she was at her husband's lack of righteous anger, and a little while after she'd flung herself off the balcony of the Roxy Cinema. Her suicide was in some ways convenient for the Fury. With the wife gone and the daughters away from home, it could plan for more elaborate tricks to unnerve its victim, without even having to concern itself with revealing its presence to creatures the powers had not marked for attack. Revealing its presence, but the absence of the wife left the house empty during the days, and that soon became a burden of boredom for the Yattering. Wait, I skipped a line. The absence of the wife left the house empty during the days, and that soon became a burden of boredom the Yattering found scarcely supportable. The hours from 9 to 5 alone in the house often seemed endless. It would mope and wander, planning bizarre and impractical revenges upon the Polo man pacing the rooms, heartsick, accompanied only by the clicks and whirs of the house as the radiators cooled or the refrigerator switched itself on and off. The situation rapidly became so desperate that the arrival of the midday post became the high point of the day, and the unshakable melancholy would settle on the Yattering if the postman had nothing to deliver and passed by to the next house. When Jack returned, the games would begin in earnest, the usual warm-up routine. It would meet Jack at the door and prevent his key from turning in the lock. The contest would go on for a minute or two until Jack accidentally found the measure of the Yattering's resistance and won the day. Once inside, it would start all the lampshades swinging. The man would usually ignore this performance, however violent the motion. Perhaps he might shrug and murmur subsidence under his breath, then inevitably, "Chez Sarah, Sarah." In the bathroom, the Yattering would have squeezed toothpaste around the toilet seat and have plugged up the shower head with soggy toilet paper. It would even share the shower with Jack, hanging unseen from the rail that held up the shower curtain and murmuring obscene suggestions in his ear. That was always successful. The demons were taught at the academy. The obscenities in the ear routine never failed to distress clients, making them think they were conceiving of the pernicious acts themselves and driving them to self-disgust, then to self-rejection, and finally to madness. Of course, in a few cases, the victims would be so inflamed by these whispered suggestions, they'd go out on the streets and act upon them. Under such circumstances, the victim would often be arrested and incarcerated. Prison would lead to further crimes and a slow dwindling of moral reserves, and the victory was won by that route. On one way or another, insanity would win out. Except that for some reason this rule did not apply to Polo. He was unperturbable, a tower of propriety. Indeed, the way things were going, the Yattering would be the one to break. It was tired, so very tired. Endless days of tormenting the cat, reading the funnies in yesterday's newspaper, watching the game shows. They drained the Fury. Lately, it had developed a passion for the woman who lived across the street from Polo. She was a young widow and seemed to spend most of her life parading around the house stark naked. It was almost unbearable sometimes in the middle of a day when the postman failed to call, watching the woman and knowing it could never cross the threshold of Polo's house. This was the law. The Yattering was a minor demon and his soul-catching was strictly confined to the perimeters of the victim's house. To step outside was to relinquish all powers over the victim, to put itself at the mercy of humanity. All June, all July, and most of August it sweated in its prison. And through those bright hot months, Jack Polo maintained complete indifference to the Yattering's attacks. It was deeply embarrassing, and it was gradually destroying the demon's self-confidence, seeing this bland victim survive every trial and trick attempting upon him. The Yattering wept, the Yattering screamed. In a fit of uncontrollable anguish, it boiled the water in the aquarium, poaching the guppies. Polo heard nothing, saw nothing. At last, in late September, the Yattering broke one of the first rules of its condition and appealed directly to its masters. Autumn is Hell's season, and the demons of the higher dominations were feeling benign. They condescended to speak to their creature. "What do you want?" asked Beelzebub, his voice blackening the air in the lounge. "This man," the Yattering began nervously. "Yes?" "This Polo." "Yes?" "I am without issue upon him. I cannot get panic upon him. I can't breed fear or even mild concern upon him. I'm sterile, Lord of the Flies, and I wish to be put out of my misery." For a moment, Beelzebub's face formed in the mirror over the mantelpiece. "You want what?" Beelzebub was part elephant, part wasp. The Yattering was terrified. "I want to die." "You cannot die." "From this world, just die from this world, fade away, be replaced." "You will not die." "But I can't break him," the Yattering shrieked tearfully. "You must." "Why?" "Because we tell you to." Beelzebub always used the royal we, though unqualified to do so. "Let me at least know why I'm in this house," the Yattering appealed. "What is he? Nothing. He's nothing." Beelzebub found this rich. He laughed, buzzed, trumpeted. "Jack Johnson Polo is the child of a worshipper at the Church of Lost Salvation. He belongs to us." "But why should you want him? He's so dull." "We want him because his soul was promised to us, and his mother did not deliver it, or herself come to that. She cheated us. She died in the arms of a priest and was safely escorted to—" The word that followed was anathema. The Lord of the Flies could barely bring himself to pronounce it. "Heaven," said Beelzebub, with infinite loss in his voice. "Heaven," said the Yattering, not knowing quite what was meant by the word. "Polo is to be hounded in the name of the Old One, and punished for his mother's crimes. No torment is too profound for a family that has cheated us." "I'm tired," the Yattering pleaded, daring to approach the mirror. "Please, I beg you." "Claim this man," said Beelzebub, "or you will suffer in his place." The figure in the mirror waved its black and yellow trunk and faded. "Where is your pride?" said the master's voice as it shriveled into distance. "Pride, Yattering, pride." Then he was gone. In its frustration, the Yattering picked up the cat and threw it into the fire, where it was rapidly cremated. If only the law allowed such easy cruelty to be visited upon human flesh, it thought. If only, then it'd make Polo suffer such torments. But no. The Yattering knew the laws as well as the back of its hand. They had been flayed onto its exposed cortex as a fledgling demon by its teachers. And law once stated, "Thou shalt not lay palm upon thy victim." It had never been told why this law pertained, but it did. Thou shalt not. So the whole painful process continued, day in, day out, and still the man showed no sign of yielding. Over the next few weeks, the Yattering killed 2 more cats that Polo brought home to replace his treasured Freddy, now Ash. The first of these poor victims was drowned in the toilet bowl one idle Friday afternoon. It was a perfect satisfaction to see the look of distaste register on Polo's face as he unzipped his fly and glanced down. But any pleasure the Yattering took in Jack's discomfort was cancelled out by the blithe, efficient way in which the man dealt with the dead cat, hoisting the bundle of soaking fur out of the pan, wrapping it in a towel, and burying it in the backyard with scarcely a murmur. The third cat that Polo brought home was wise to the invisible presence of the demon from the start. There was indeed an entertaining week in mid-November when life for the Yattering became almost interesting while it played cat and mouse with Freddy the Third. Freddy played the mouse. Cats not being especially bright animals, the game was scarcely a great intellectual challenge, but it made a change from the endless days of waiting, haunting, and failing. At last the creature accepted the Yattering's presence. Eventually, however, in a filthy mood, caused by the remarriage of the Yattering's naked widow, the demon lost its temper with the cat. It was sharpening its nails on the nylon carpet, clawing and scratching at the pile for hours on end. The noise put the demon's metaphysical teeth on edge. It looked at the cat once, briefly, and it flew apart as though it had swallowed a live grenade. The effect was spectacular. The results were gross. Cat brain, cat fur, cat gut, everywhere. Polo got home that evening, exhausted, and stood in the doorway of the dining room, his face sickened, surveying the carnage that had been Freddy 3. Damn dogs, he said. Damn dogs. There was anger in his voice. Yes, exulted the Yattering. Anger. The man was upset. There was clear evidence of emotion on his face. Elated, the demon raced through the house, determined to capitalize on its victory. It opened and slammed every door. It smashed vases. It set the lampshades swinging. Polo just cleaned up the cat. The Yattering threw itself downstairs, tore up a pillow, impersonated a thing with a limp and an appetite for human flesh in the attic, and giggling. Polo just buried Freddy 3 beside the grave of Freddy 2 and the ashes of Freddy 1. Then he retired to bed without his pillow. The demon was utterly stumped. If the man could not raise more than a flicker of concern when his cat was exploded in the dining room, what chance had it got of ever breaking the bastard? There was one last opportunity left. It was approaching Christ's Mass, and Jack's children would be coming home to the bosom of family. Perhaps they could convince him that all was not well with the world. Perhaps they could get their fingernails under his flawless indifference and begin to break him down. Hoping against hope, the Yattering sat out the weeks to late December, planning its attack with all the imaginative malice it could muster. Meanwhile, Jack's life sauntered on. ESL moment? No, it literally says Christ's Mass. It's not an ESL moment. I know it's Christmas, but it's typed out as Christ's Mass. Like that. The cat was gloomy. I got exploded in the dining room. Shit. I wish that was me. Gloomy? Yes. Yes? Meanwhile, Jack's life sauntered on. He seemed to live apart from his experience, living his life as an author might write a preposterous story, never involving himself in the narrative too deeply. In several significant ways, however, he showed his enthusiasm for the coming holidays. He cleared his daughter's room immaculately. He made their beds up with sweet-smelling linen. He cleaned every speck of cat's blood out of the carpet. He even set up a Christmas tree in the lounge, hung with iridescent balls, tinsels, and presents. Once in a while, as he went about the preparation, Jack thought of the game he was playing and quietly calculated the odds against him. In the days to come, he would have to measure not only his own suffering, but that of his daughters against the possible victory, and always, when he made those calculations, the chance of victory seemed to outweigh the risks. So he continued to write his life, and waited. Snow came, soft pats of it against the windows, against the door. Children arrived to sing carols, and he was generous to them. It was possible for a brief time to believe in peace on earth. Late in the evening of the 23rd of December, the daughters arrived in a flurry of cases and kisses. The youngest, Amanda, arrived home first. From its vantage point on the landing, the Yattering viewed the young woman balefully. She didn't look like ideal material in which to induce a breakdown. In fact, she looked dangerous. Gina followed an hour or two later. A smoothly polished woman of the world at 24, she looked every bit as intimidating as her sister. They came into the house with their bustle and their laughter. They rearranged the furniture. They threw out the junk food in the freezer. They told each other, and their father, how much they had missed each other's company. Within the space of a few hours, the drab house was repainted with light and fun and love. It made the Yatterings sick. Whimpering, it hid its head in the bedroom to block out the dim of affection, but the shock waves enveloped it. All it could do was sit and listen and refine its revenge. Jack was pleased to have his beauties home. Amanda so full of opinions and so strong like her mother. Gina more like his mother, poised, perceptive. She was happy in their presence. He was so happy in their presence he could have wept. And here was he, the proud father, putting them both at such risk. But what was the alternative? If he had cancelled the Christmas celebrations, it would have looked highly suspicious. It might even have spoiled his whole strategy, wakening the enemy to the trick that was being played. No, he must sit tight, play dumb, the way the enemy had come to expect him to. The time would come for action. At 3:15 a.m. on Christmas morning, the Yattering opened hostilities by throwing Amanda out of bed. A paltry performance at best, but it had the intended effect. Sleepily rubbing her bruised head, she climbed back into bed, only to have the bed buck and shake and fling her off again like an unbroken colt. The noise woke the rest of the house. Gina was first in her sister's room. What's going on? There's somebody under the bed. What? Gina picked up a paperweight from the dresser and demanded the assailant come out. The Yattering, invisible, sat on the window seat and made obscene gestures at the woman, tying knots in its genitalia. Gina peered under the bed. The Yattering was clinging to the light fixture now, persuading it to swing backwards and forwards, making the room reel. There's nothing there. There is. Amanda knew. Oh yes, she knew. There's something here, Gina, she said. Something in this room with us, I'm sure of it. No, Gina was absolute. It's empty. Amanda was searching behind the wardrobe when Polo came in. What's all the din? There's something in the house, Daddy. I was thrown out of bed. Jack looked at the crumpled sheets, the dislodged mattress, then at Amanda. This was the first test. He must lie, as casually as possible. Looks like you've been having nightmares, Beauty, he said, affecting an innocent smile. There was something under the bed, Amanda insisted. There's nobody here now. But I felt it. Well, I'll check the rest of the house, he offered without enthusiasm for the task. You two stay here, just in case. As Polo left the room, the Yattering rocked the light a little more. Subsidence, said Gina. It was cold downstairs, and Polo could have done without padding around barefoot on the kitchen tiles, but he was quietly satisfied that the battle had been joined in such a petty manner. He'd half feared that the enemy would turn savage with such tender victims at hand, but no, he judged the mind of the creature quite accurately. It was one of the lower orders, powerful but slow, capable of being invigiled? Invalid? Invigil? Whatever. I don't know how to say this word. I don't know how to say this word. Inveigiled? Inveiled? Invalid? I don't know. Nvidia. I don't know. Invalid? The G is throwing me off. You had it mostly right the first time? No, not Ted. Not Ted. Inveiled. INVEIGLED. INVEIGLED. I don't know. Yeah, INVEIGLED. I don't know. I don't know this word. I'm just gonna read it as unveiled. I don't know, but it doesn't seem right. Capable of being unveiled beyond the limits of its control. Carefully does it. He told himself. Carefully does it. It's unveiled? The G is silent? Bruh. Bruh. Inveigle? Inveigled? Okay. Alright. If you say so. He trapezed through the entire house, dutifully opening cupboards and peering behind the furniture, then returned to his daughters, who were sitting at the top of the stairs. Amanda looked small and pale, not the 22-year-old woman she was, but a child again. Nothing doing, he told her with a smile. It's Christmas morning, and all through the house, Gina finished the rhyme. Nothing is stirring, not even a mouse. Not even a mouse, beauty. At that moment, the Yattering took its cue to fling a vase off the lounge mantelpiece. Even Jack jumped. Shit, he said. He needed some sleep, but quite clearly the Yattering had no intention of letting them alone just yet. Chez Sarah, he murmured, scooping up the pieces of the Chinese vase and putting them in a piece of newspaper. The house is sinking a little on the left side, you know, he said more loudly. It has been for years. Subsidence, said Amanda with quiet certainty. Would not throw me out of my bed. Gina said nothing. The options were limited, the alternatives unattractive. Well, maybe it was Santa Claus, said Polo, attempting levity. He parceled up the pieces of the vase and wandered through into the kitchen, certain that he was being shadowed every step of the way. What else can it be? He threw the question over his shoulder as he stuffed the newspaper into the waste bin. The only other explanation, here he had almost become elated by his skimming so close to the truth. The only other possible explanation is too preposterous for words. It was an exquisite irony, denying the existence of the invisible world and the full knowledge that even now it breathed vengefully down his neck. You mean poltergeist? Said Gina. I mean anything that goes bang in the night, but we're grown-up people, aren't we? We don't believe in boogeymen. No, Gina said flatly, I don't. But I don't believe the house is subsiding either. Well, it'll have to do for now, said Jack with nonchalant finality. Christmas starts here. We don't want to spoil it talking about gremlins now, do we? They laughed together. Gremlins, that surely bit deep. To call the hellspawn a gremlin. The Yattering, weak with frustration, acid tears boiling on its intangible cheeks, ground its teeth and kept its peace. There would be time yet to beat the atheistic smile off Jack Polo's smooth, fat face. Time aplenty, no half measures from now on, no subtlety. It would be an all-out attack. Let there be blood, let there be agony, they'd all break. Amanda was in the kitchen preparing Christmas dinner when the Yattering mounted its next attack. Through the house drifted the sound of King's College Choir, O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. The presents had been opened, and G&Ts were being downed. The house was one warm embrace from roof to cellar. In the kitchen, a sudden chill permeated the heat and the steam, making Amanda shiver. She crossed to the window, which was ajar, to clear the air and close it. Maybe she was catching something. The Yattering watched her back as she busied herself about the kitchen, enjoying the domesticity for a day. Amanda felt the stare quite clearly. She turned around. Nothing. Nobody. She continued to wash the Brussels sprouts, cutting into one with a worm curled in the middle. She drowned it. The choir sang on. In the lounge, Jack was laughing with Gina about something. Then a noise. A rattling at first, followed by a beating of somebody's fists against the door. Amanda dropped the knife into the bowl of sprouts and turned from the sink, following the sound. It was getting louder. It was getting louder all the time, like something locked in on one of the cupboards, desperate to escape. A cat caught in a box or a bird. It was coming from the oven. Amanda's stomach turned as she began to imagine the worst. Had she locked something in the oven when she'd put in the turkey? She called for her father as he snatched up the oven cloth and stepped towards the cooker, which was rocking with the panic of its prisoner. She had visions of a bastard cat leaping out at her, its fur burned off, its flesh half cooked. Jack was at the kitchen door. "There's something in the oven," she said to him, as though he needed telling. The cooker was in a frenzy. Its thrashing contents had all but beaten off the door. He took the oven cloth from her. This is a new one, he thought. You're better than I judged you to be. This is clever. This is original. Gina was in the kitchen now. What's cooking? She quipped. But the joke was lost as the cooker began to dance, and the pans of boiling water were twitching off the burners onto the floor. Scalding water seared Jack's leg. He yelled, stumbling into Gina, before diving at the cooker with a yell that wouldn't have shamed a samurai. The oven's handle was slippery with heat and grease, but he seized it and flung the door down. A wave of steam and blistering heat rolled out of the oven, smelling of succulent turkey fat, but the bird inside had apparently no intentions of being eaten. It was flinging itself from side to side on the roasting tray, tossing gouts of gravy in all directions. Its crisp, brown wings pitifully flailed and flapped its legs beat a tattoo on the roof of the oven. Hi Raiders! Hello, hi, welcome in. Thank you for the raid. Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope you had a wonderful stream. Thank you for the raid. Thank you. For any raiders who don't know me, my name is Gloomi. I'm a stupid cat girl on the internet, and we're hanging out. Reading a short story. This is the last short story I will be reading today, so enjoy it. Headless, oozing, stuffing and onions, it flopped around as though nobody had told the damn thing it was dead, while the fat still bubbled on its bacon-strewn back. Amanda screamed. Oh wait, I skipped a paragraph by accident. Then it seemed to sense the open door. Its wings stretched themselves out to either side of the stuffed bulk as it half hopped, half fell onto the oven door in a mockery of its living self. Headless, oozing stuffing and onions, it flopped around as though nobody had told the damn thing it was dead, while the fat still bubbled on its bacon-strewn back. Amanda screamed. Jack dived for the door as the bird lurched into the air, blind but vengeful. What it intended to do once it reached its 3 cowering victims was never discovered. Gina dragged Amanda into the hallway with her father in hot pursuit, and the door was slammed closed as the bird flung itself against the paneling, beating on it with all its strength. Gravy seeped through the gap at the bottom of the door, dark and fatty. The door had no lock, but Jack reasoned that the bird was not capable of turning the handle. As he backed away breathless, he cursed his confidence. The opposition had more up its sleeve than he'd guessed. Amanda was leaning against the wall, sobbing, her face stained with splotches of turkey grease. All she seemed able to do was deny what she'd seen, shaking her head and repeating the word no, like a talisman against the ridiculous horror that was still throwing itself against the door. Jack escorted her through to the lounge. The radio was still crooning carols which blotted out the din of the bird, but their promise of goodwill seemed small comfort. Gina poured a hefty brandy for her sister and sat beside her on the sofa, plying her with spirits and reassurance in equal measure. They made little impression on Amanda. What was that? Gina asked her father in a tone that demanded an answer. I don't know what it was, Jack replied. Mass hysteria? Gina's displeasure was plain. Her father had a secret. He knew what was going on in the house, but he was refusing to cough up for some reason. What do I call? The police or an exorcist? Neither. For God's sake, there's nothing going on, Gina. Really. Her father turned from the window and looked at her. His eyes spoke what his mouth refused to say. This was war. Jack was afraid. The house was suddenly a prison. The game was suddenly lethal. The enemy, instead of playing foolish games, meant harm, real harm to them all. In the kitchen, the turkey had at last conceded defeat. The carols on the radio had withered into a sermon on God's benedictions. What had been sweet and sour and dangerous. He looked across the room at Amanda and Gina, both for their own reasons, were trembling. Polo wanted to tell them, wanted to explain what was going on, but the thing must be there. He knew, gloating. He was wrong. The Yattering had retired to the attic, well satisfied with its endeavors. The bird, it felt, had been a stroke of genius. Now it could rest a while, recuperate, let the enemy's nerves tatter themselves in anticipation. Then, in its own time, it would deliver the coup de grace. Idly, it wondered if any of the inspectors had seen his work with the turkey. Maybe they would be impressed by the Yattering's originality to improve its job prospects. Surely it hadn't gone through all those years of training simply to chase half-witted imbeciles like Polo. There must be something more challenging available than that. It felt victory in its invisible bones, and it was a good feeling. The pursuit of Polo would surely gain momentum now. His daughters would convince him, if he wasn't now quite convinced, that there was something terrible afoot. He would crack, he would crumble. Maybe he'd go classically mad, tear out his hair, rip off his clothes, smear himself with his own excrement. Oh yes, victory was close. And wouldn't its masters be loving then? Wouldn't it be showered with praise and power? One more manifestation was all that was required. One final inspired intervention, and Polo would be so much blubbering flesh. Tired but confident, the Yattering descended into the lounge. Amanda was lying full length on the sofa asleep. She was obviously dreaming about the turkey. Her eyes rolled beneath her gossamer lids, her lower lip trembled. Gina sat beside the radio, which was silenced now. She had a book open on her lap, but she wasn't reading it. The gherkin importer wasn't in the room. Wasn't that his footstep on the stairs? On the stair? Yes, he was going upstairs to relieve his brandy-full bladder. Ideal timing. The Yattering crossed the room. In her sleep, Amanda dreamt something dark, flittering across her vision. Something malign, something that tasted bitter in her mouth. Gina looked up from her book. The silver balls on the tree were rocking gently. Not just the balls, the tinsel and the branches too. In fact, the whole tree was rocking as though something had just seized hold of it. Gina had a very bad feeling about this. She stood up. The book slid to the floor. The tree began to spin. Christ, she said. Jesus Christ. Amanda slept on. The tree picked up momentum. Gina walked as steadily as she could across the sofa and tried to shake her sister awake. Amanda, locked in her dreams, resisted for a moment. Father, said Gina. Her voice was strong and carried through into the hall. It also woke Amanda. Downstairs, Polo heard a noise like a whining dog. No, like two whining dogs. As he ran down the stairs, the duet became a trio. He burst into the lounge half expecting all the hosts of hell to be there, dog-headed, dancing on his beauties. But no, it was the Christmas tree that was whining like a pack of dogs as it spun and spun. The lights had long since been pulled from the socket. The air stank of singed plastic and pine sap. The tree itself was spinning like a top, flinging decorations and presents off its tortured branches with the largesse of a mad king. Jack tore his eyes from the spectacle of the tree and found Gina and Amanda crouching, terrified, behind the sofa. "Get out of here," he yelled. Even as he spoke, the television sat up impertinently on one leg and began to spin like the tree, gathering momentum quickly. The clock on the mantelpiece joined the pirouetting. The pokers beside the fire, the cushions, the ornaments. Each object added its own singular note to the orchestration of whines which were building up, second by second, to a deafening pitch. The air began to brim with the smell of burning wood as a friction heated the spinning tops to a flashpoint. Smoke swirled across the room. Gina had Amanda by the arm and was dragging her towards the door, shielding her face against the hail of pine needles that the still accelerating tree was throwing off. Now the lights were spinning. The books, having flung themselves off the shelves, had joined the tarantella. Jack could see the enemy in his mind's eye, racing between the objects like a juggler spinning plates on a stick, trying to keep them all moving at once. It must be exhausting work, he thought. The demon was probably close to collapse. It couldn't be thinking straight. Overexcited, impulsive, vulnerable. That must be the moment, if ever there was a moment, to join battle at last, to face the thing, defy it, and trap it. For its part, the Yattering was enjoying the orgy of destruction. It flung every movable object into the fray, setting everything spinning. It watched with satisfaction as the daughters twitched and scurried. It laughed to see the old man stare, pop-eyed, at the preposterous ballot. Surely he was nearly mad, wasn't he? The beauties had reached the door, their hair and skin full of needles. Polo didn't see them leave. He ran across the room, dodging a rain of ornaments to do so, and picked up a brass toasting fork which the enemy had overlooked. Bric-a-brac filled the air around his head, dancing around with sickening speed. His flesh was bruised and punctured, but the exhilaration of joining battle had overtaken him, and he set about beating the books and the clocks and the china to smithereens. Like a man in a cloud of locusts, he ran around the room, bringing down his favorite books in a welter of fluttering pages, smashing whirling Dresden, shattering the lamps. A litter of broken possessions swamped the floor. Some of it still twitching as the life went out of the fragments. But for every object brought low, there were a dozen still spinning, still whining. He could hear Gina at the door yelling to him to get out, to leave it alone. But it was so enjoyable, playing against the enemy more directly than he'd ever allowed himself before. He didn't want to give up. He wanted the demon to show himself, to be known, to be recognized. He wanted confrontation with the old one's emissary once and for all. Without warning, the tree gave way to a dictates of centrifugal force and exploded. The noise was like a howl of death. Branches, twigs, needles, balls, lights, wires, ribbons flew across the room. Jack, his back to the explosion, felt a gust of energy hit him hard, and he was flung to the ground. The back of his neck and scalp were shot full of pine needles. A branch, naked of greenery, shot past his head and impaled the sofa. Fragments of tree powdered to the carpet around him. Now other objects around the room, spun beyond the tolerance of their structures, were exploding like the tree. The television blew up, sending a lethal wave of glass across the room, much of which buried itself in the opposite wall. Fragments of the television's innards, so hot they singed the skin, fell on Jack as he elbowed himself toward the door like a soldier under bombardment. The room was so thick with a barrage of shards it was like a fog. The cushions had lent their down to the scene, snowing on the carpet. Porcelain pieces, a beautiful glazed arm, a courtesan's head, bounced on the floor in front of his nose. Gina was crouching at the door, urging him to hurry, her eyes narrowed against the hail. As Jack reached the door, he felt her arms around him and swore he could hear laughter from the lounge. Tangible, audible laughter, rich and satisfied. Amanda was standing in the hall, her hair full of pine needles, staring down at him. He pulled his legs through the doorway and Gina slammed the door shut on the demolition. "What is it?" she demanded. "Poltergeist? Ghost? Mother's ghost?" The thought of his dead wife being responsible for such a wholesale destruction struck Jack as funny. Amanda was half smiling. Good, he thought, she's coming out of it. Then he met the vacant look in her eye and the truth dawned. She'd broken. Her sanity was taken refuge where the fantastique couldn't get at it. "What's in there?" Gina was asking, her grip on his arm so strong it stopped the blood. "I don't know," he lied. "Amanda?" Amanda's smile didn't decay. She just stared at him, through him. "You do know." "No." "You're lying." "I think..." He picked himself off the floor, brushing the pieces of porcelain, the feathers, the glass off his shirt and trousers. "I think I shall go for a walk." Behind him in the lounge, the last vestiges of whining had stopped. The air in the hallway was electric and with unseen presences. It was so close. It was very close to him, invisible as ever, but so close. This was the most dangerous time. He mustn't lose his nerve now. He must stand up as though nothing had happened. He must leave Amanda be, leave explanations and and recriminations until it was all over and done with. Walk? Gina said disbelievingly. Yes, walk. I need some fresh air. You can't leave us here. I'll find somebody to help us clear up. But Mandy, she'll get over it. Leave her be. That was hard. That was almost unforgivable. But it was said now. He walked unsteadily towards the front door, feeling nauseous after so much spinning. At his back, Gina was raging. You can't leave? Are you out of your mind? I need the air, he said as casually as his thumping heart and his parched throat would permit. So I'll just go out for a moment. No, the Yattering said. No, no, no. It was behind him. Polo could feel it. So angry now, so ready to twist off his head, except that it wasn't allowed ever to touch him, but he could feel its resentment like a physical presence. He took another step towards the front door. It was with him still, dodging his every step, his shadow, his fetch, unshakable. Gina shrieked at him. You son of a bitch, look at Mandy, she's lost her mind. No, he mustn't look at Mandy. If he looked at Mandy, he might weep. He might break down, as the thing wanted him to. Then everything would be lost. She'll be all right, he said, barely above a whisper. He reached for the front door handle. The demon bolted the door quickly, loudly, no temper left for pretense now. Jack kept his movements as even as possible, unbolted the door, top and bottom. It bolted again. It was thrilling, this game. It was also terrifying. If he pushed too far, surely the demon's frustration would override its lessons. Gently, smoothly, he unbolted the door again. Just as gently, just as smoothly, the Yattering bolted it. Jack wondered how long he could keep this up for. Somehow, he had to get outside. He had to coax it over the threshold. One step was all that the law required, according to his researches. One simple step. Unbolted, bolted, unbolted, bolted. Gina was standing 2 or 3 yards behind her father. She didn't understand what she was seeing, but it was obvious her father was doing battle with someone or something. Daddy, she began. Shut up, he said benignly, grinning as he unbolted the door for the 7th time. There was a shiver of lunacy in the grin. It was too wide and too easy. Inexplicably, she returned the smile. It was grim, but genuine. Whatever was at issue here, she loved him. Polo made a break for the back door. The demon was 3 paces ahead of him, scooting through the house like a sprinter and bolting the door before Jack could even reach the handle. The key was turned in the lock by invisible hands, then crushed to dust in the air. Jack feigned a move towards the window besides the back door, but the blinds were pulled down and the shutters slammed. The Yattering, too concerned with the window to watch Jack closely, missed his double back through the house. When it saw the trick that was being played, it let out a little screech and gave chase, almost sliding into Jack on the smoothly polished floor. It avoided the collision only by the most balletic of maneuvers. That would be fatal indeed, to touch the man in the heat of the moment. Polo was again at the front door, and Gina, wise to her father's strategy, had unbolted it while the Yattering and Jack fought at the back door. Jack had prayed she'd take the opportunity to open it. She had. It stood slightly ajar. The icy air of the crisp afternoon curled its way into the hallway. Jack covered the last yards to the door in a flash, feeling without hearing the howl of complaint the Yattering loosed as it saw its victim escaping into the outside world. It was not an ambitious creature. All it wanted at that moment, beyond any other dream, was to take this human skull between its palms and make a nonsense of it. Crush it to smithereens and pour the hot thought out onto the snow, to be done with Jack J. Polo forever and forever. Was that so much to ask? Polo had stepped into the squeaky fresh snow, his slippers and trouser bottoms buried in chill. By the time the Fury reached the step, Jack was already there, 3 or 4 yards away, marching up the path towards the gate, escaping. The Yattering howled again, forgetting its years of training. Every lesson it had learned, every rule of battle engraved on its skull was submerged by the simple desire to have Polo's life. It stepped over the threshold and gave chase. It was an unpardonable transgression. Somewhere in hell, the powers, long may they hold court, long may they shit light on the heads of the damned, felt the sin and knew the war for Jack Polo's soul was lost. Jack felt it too. He heard the sound of boiling water as the demon's footsteps melted to steam the snow of the path. On the path, it was coming after him. The thing had broken the first rule of its existence. It was forfeit. He felt the victory in his spine and his stomach. The demon overtook him at the gate. Its breath could clearly be seen in the air, though the body it emanated from had not become visible. Jack tried to open the gate, but the Yattering slammed it shut. "Shesera, Sarah," said Jack. The Yattering could bear it no longer. He took Jack's head in his hands, intending to crush the fragile bone to dust. The touch was its second sin, and it agonized the Yattering beyond endurance. It bayed like a banshee and reeled away from the contact, sliding in the snow and falling on its back. It knew its mistake. The lesson it had beaten into it came hurtling back. It knew the punishment too, for leaving the house, for touching the man. It was bound to a new lord, enslaved to this idiot creature standing over it. Polo had won. He was laughing, watching the way the outline of the demon formed in the snow on the path. Like a photograph developing on a sheet of paper, the image of the fury came clear. The law was taking its toll. The Yattering could never hide from its master again. There it was, plain to Polo's eyes, in all its charmless glory. Maroon flesh and bright lidless eyes, arms flailing, tail thrashing the snow to slush. "You bastard," it said. Its accent had an Australian lilt. "You will not speak unless spoken to," Polo said, quiet but absolute. "Authority, understood." The lidless eyes clouded with humility. "Yes," the Yattering said. "Yes, Mr. Polo." "Yes, Mr. Polo." Its tail slipped between its legs like that of a whipped dog. "You may stand." "Thank you, Mr. Polo." It stood, not a pleasant sight, but one Jack rejoiced in nevertheless. "They'll have you yet," said the Yattering. "Who will?" "You know," it said, hesitantly. "Name them." "Beelzebub," it answered, proud to name its old master. "The powers, hell itself." "I don't think so," Polo mused. "Not with you bound to me as proof of my skills." "Aren't I the better of them?" The eyes looked sullen. "Aren't I?" "Yes," it conceded bitterly. "Yes, you are the better of them." It had begun to shiver. "Are you cold?" asked Polo. It nodded, affecting the look of a lost child. "Then you need some exercise," he said. "You better go back into the house and start tidying up." The Fury looked bewildered, even disappointed by the instruction. "Nothing more?" it asked incredulously. "No miracles, no Helen of Troy, no flying?" The thought of flying on a snow-spattered afternoon like this left Polo cold. He was essentially a man of simple taste. All he asked for in life was the love of his children, a pleasant home, and a good trading price for gherkins. "No flying," he said. As the Yattering slouched down the path towards the door, it seemed to alight upon a new piece of mischief. It turned back to Polo. Obsequious but unmistakably smug. "Could I just say something?" it said. "Speak." "It's only fair that I inform you that it's considered ungodly to have any contact with the likes of me. Heretical, even." "Is that so?" "Oh yes," said the Yattering, warming to its prophecy. "People have been burned for less." "Not in this day and age," Polo replied. "But the Seraphim will see," it said, "and that means you'll never go to that place." "What place?" The Yattering fumbled for the special word it had heard Beelzebub use. "Heaven," it said, triumphant. An ugly grin had come on its face. This was the cleverest maneuver it had ever attempted. It was juggling theology here. Jack nodded slowly, nibbling at his bottom lip. The creature was probably telling the truth. Association with it or its like would not be looked upon benignly by the host of saints and angels. He probably was forbidden access to the plains of paradise. "Well," he said, "you know what I have to say about that, don't you?" The Yattering stared at him, frowning. No, it didn't know. Then the grin of satisfaction it had been wearing died, as it saw just what Polo was driving at. "What do I say?" Polo asked it. Defeated, the Yattering murmured the phrase, "Shesera, Sarah." Polo smiled. "There's a chance for you yet," he said. and led the way over the threshold, closing the door with something very like serenity on his face. The end. The man is serious about pickles. Hey, you never want to, I assume if you're a trader, no matter what you're importing, exporting, no matter what you're trading, you want that market to stay strong, right? That's the end. That's the end. He overcomes his little demon. It wasn't scary, but it was a good story. Who the fuck is this guy? Yeah, how does he know? How does he know that he's being, you know, not haunted, but, you know, how does he know he's got a demon attached to him? The humble pickle merchant / demon hunter. But yeah, that's it. That's all I got for tonight. I'm tired. My throat hurts. I'm tired and my throat hurts. So I'm gonna go get a snack. I'm gonna go get a snack and lay down. Yeah. But thank you guys for hanging out with me today. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed reading stream. I know it's a bit different than normal streams. It's pretty different, but yeah, I don't know. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm gonna send you guys into Mishur. She's playing Baldur's Gate 3. She's doing a dirge playthrough, so she's gonna be an evil little peon today. But yeah, thank you guys for hanging out. Thank you. I'll be back on Monday. Twitter here, Discord here if you want to join or follow, if you want to get stream updates, if you want to hang out or anything like that. I'll post the schedule either on Sunday or Monday. And yeah, thank you guys for hanging out with me. I appreciate it. Thank you everybody for the gift subs and for subbing. Thank you for helping me hit the 2nd month of Partner Plus. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Also, merch is available if you are thinking about ordering merch. If you order merch before the end of this month, before latest on the 31st, it will get produced and shipped out at some point in June. Otherwise, the sales run until September, but if you want it early, you can order now. Also 10% off with code Gloomi at Advanced GG. And that's it. Thanks everyone. Thanks for hanging out. I'm gonna go lay down now. Good night. I'll see you on Monday. Have a good weekend. Bye.